All right, Hardianas. That was a fucking incredible episode, Delby.
I need to reload on my nutrition.
Before we get into our guest and what we talked about, we have a big show in Exmouth coming up, and Coral Bay, two shows.
18th, 19th of April.
For the eclipse.
Yeah. So if you know anyone going up, or if you got any mates that are in the area or passing through, please send it on. It's going to be huge. We got me, Max Shane, doing Who's Rhyme. I'll do some stand-up. Squirrely will do some stand-up. And Branchy's doing a nudie run.
Well, fuck. I didn't know about that one. But yes. We're going to have a bit of fun up there. And we're going to get Dr. Robin Cook is going to be there now, the astrophysicist. So we're going to have a chat with him, probably do a podcast up there with him. So and potentially a chance to meet him and have a chat with him.
If you don't know who Dr. Robin Cook is, jump on YouTube.
Do
us a huge favour. Branchy's been busting his ass behind the scenes.
Yeah, so YouTube, it's actually difficult. So we've been putting our links in, like, you know, the Insta stories and on Facebook. But when you click it, you can't actually subscribe directly to YouTube straight away through the apps. It's weird.
It's a pain in the ass.
It's a pain in the ass. So go onto YouTube, find our channel, and just click subscribe. We don't care if you listen and watch. We just need those 1,000 subscribers so we can then monetize.
Yeah, so if you're a Spotify listener or iTunes or whatever, just do us a favour, press pause. Jump on YouTube now, please, and just subscribe. You don't have to watch anything.
Yeah, it doesn't cost anything. It's just giving us a subscriber. So.
And it's cheaper than the Patreon, I guess.
Yes.
But if you want to get on the Patreon, it's like OnlyFans for podcasts.
Delby, you have done this very well. So, yeah, it is like OnlyFans for podcasts. Basically, if you join the Patreon, you'll get bonus content, bonus episodes.
Merchandise.
What are they called? Discount codes.
Discount codes
tickets
for shows and all sorts of stuff.
So plenty of benefits. And you get merch with it, depending on what tier you get, and some stickers and coffee cups and stuff. So it's you get something out of it regardless.
Yeah. So you'll get benefits to the upper joke too, which is epic. We talk a bit more about that later in the pod. But we are joined by not Corey White.
No.
Corey Green.
Yes, Corey Green from Athletic Institute.
It's like Reservoir Dogs.
Corey is a strength and conditioning coach. He is an Ironman.
Yep.
He is now a qualified nutritionist.
And an enemy of ego.
And an enemy of ego. He was fucking outstanding. This is probably, I'm not talking shit. I think this is your best episode. We covered a lot of good things. This is going to test if you slept well last night. Do you remember what we talked about?
Yes, obviously. So we went through sleep. That was a big part of the early part of the podcast. We talked about obviously nutrition, polarizing views, different types of nutrition, how you can obviously lose weight, gain weight, all that sort of stuff.
Seed oils?
Touched on seed oils a little bit. I'm not an expert in seed oils, but definitely talked about it a little bit. And then we went into parts of exercise, a bit of my journey of nutrition.
That's a really interesting part.
Yeah, that was really good.
And I think we talked about a few other things as well, but it was a good podcast. Some learnings to take away from it, some readings to take away, some suggestions on that as well. So
lots of good book suggestions. So,
there was very good. And as always, you know, when we're doing a health and nutrition podcast, this episode is brought to you by Raunchy. Raunchy, the beer that actually tastes good. It's actually good. It's it really is good. We did the launch the other day at Convenience for their Sir Henry's Stout, the Irish Stout on St. Patrick's Day.
Again, I don't drink beer. I don't drink stout. But I can stomach this stuff, so there's your plug.
But you know,
and the heavy diesel was actually my favourite.
You liked
which was
it,
the most alcoholic.
But drink responsibly and enjoy our healthy episode.
Yeah, let's get hard.
Welcome to Hard Yarns Podcast.
I am fucking fat.
Anything Chris White says, please disregard it.
5D is actually a state of being. It's a unity consciousness.
That was Hard Yarns with me, Frankie Rose. So I'm going to throw it over to your co-host,
Daniel Delby.
And Cameron Branch.
I would do this and then I'd gong.
Free in attendance for the millions listening at home. Let's get hard.
Yeah. Well, let's start on coffee and sleep patterns, because Delby's been struggling lately. He's feeling a little average now, and he's not been doing too badly. He's just been sleeping poorly. So
well, Sunday night was a big night.
Yep.
So I can understand the last few days, but for as long as I can remember, I wake up I'll go to sleep, and then 2 hours later, I wake up feeling like it's been 8 hours, and always have like a nightmare or a really intense dream. Like I fall asleep like 12:30, and I'm up at 1:30, 2 o'clock without fail.
Yeah.
Going, all right, time to start. I'll look, oh, fuck. You know, and then I've got to go back to sleep, and
Poor thing.
that'll happen 2 or 3 times.
Is that overthinking things or whatever, or because you go to sleep to podcasts
Yeah.
and listening to podcasts,
Yeah.
not drowning out?
Yeah, I don't know. But I've always woken up sort of in 2-hour cycles.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a lot to this. So sleep is one of those things where for me, for athletes and anyone, it's the number one thing for recovery. So we know that. Part of the messaging that I talk to my people about is trying to reduce obviously things that affect sleep. Now, Dr. Matthew Walker is a genius in this sense, but he talks about a hormone called adenosine. So when we wake up in the morning, you might have heard this before.
yeah,
Adenosine rises.
Adenosine triphosphate is what energy is made from, right?
Yeah, correct. And so then but adenosine is a hormone that rises as soon as you wake up in the morning. So as soon as you wake up, adenosine starts to rise, right?
I know.
Along with
We're
something
like,
else.
I call adenosine.
1 minute, we're 1 minute into the podcast.
I bit my tongue. All I did was nod. The listeners will know what I was thinking.
And my youth members can't listen to this podcast now. Great. Anyway, so
I didn't say anything.
adenosine rises over the day and it creates like a sleep pressure. So as the day goes on, adenosine rises throughout the day. So as you get towards the end of the day, that sleep pressure, think of it like a pressure cooker, is now boiling over and you want to go to sleep. Okay, now caffeine, what that does is adenosine rises, have a coffee, it suppresses. Have a coffee, it suppresses. So that sleep pressure starts to mitigate across the day.
So it's not waking you up.
It's not waking
suppressing
you up, suppressing the hormone
time.
that makes you want to fall asleep.
Yeah.
So people think taking melatonin is something that helps you sleep. It doesn't help you sleep. It helps, think of a 100-meter race and melatonin being the gun that fires the race. It gets you into the process of that. So looking at like a blue light before bed, or like a phone, for example, I think they're sort of starting to debunk.
Is there mitigating studies on that? Yeah.
Yeah, so like the initial studies were like if you're looking at a blue light, particularly before bed, it suppresses melatonin for like 2 or 3 hours post looking at it. So you get this suppression of that, which then offsets like now you want to fall asleep at 1, 2 in the morning. But now I think Matthew Walker might have come back and said that it's not so much the blue light, it's more so the content you're listening to. Like, are you engaging in the content?
Yeah.
Is it something like if I can't sleep sometimes, I'll put on like a TV show on my phone and I'm out within.
Yes.
2 minutes because I'm trying to focus and stay
I do
awake.
the same. Yeah.
Paradoxical intention is what it is. Like trying to do the opposite of what you want to do can actually then create this sort of weird sort of paradox where you actually do what you didn't want to do, or you wanted to do in the first place, but you couldn't do.
I'm going to use that when I'm dating.
So look, caffeine is one of the biggest ones, and you get it in a lot of things, like obviously tea and those sorts of things. But if someone struggles with sleep, the first thing I say is try and cut caffeine down significantly. And if you listen to the Carnivore podcast, obviously cut it out completely. But that's something people are very emotionally attached to. Like, I love my coffee; it's a favorite part of my day.
Yeah,
like, I can sit there and be like just happy, like reading a book, drinking my coffee, and I'm happy. So I'm not gonna. I've cut it out before, and I will admit I have slept a million times better.
Yeah.
After like that initial 2 or 3 weeks, where that addiction sort of subsides.
Yeah.
However, then a month goes past, I am sleeping better. But then I go out socially for a coffee with someone. It's just like what we do. You can have now you got decaf, you can do all sorts of things now. But and then obviously you've obviously got ADHD. Your brain is wired very differently to on a spectrum. To other people.
Yeah. So coffee doesn't even really affect my sleep. I can have a coffee in the afternoon and sleep, but it's more the ritual. I quit coffee, cold turkey, no problem.
Ritual.
I don't get withdrawals or anything,
Which is good.
It's more the ritual. I like to go there, and I feel bad that I'm going to a cafe and not buying a product, and I don't want to buy like all the cakes and shit,
all the sugary stuff.
There's nothing really healthy.
Yeah, it's
at
very hard.
cafes, and I'm just like, I'll buy a coffee.
I would argue though, like your thought process on it affecting your sleep, like. So Matthew Walker, they talk about the study in the book about sleep deprivation, and they did a simple memory. So like a light pops up on a computer screen, and you've got to click when you see it as a response to it, right? So then they have 4 groups: a group that sleeps 8 hours a night, a group that sleeps 4 hours a night, one that sleeps 6, and one that does a 3-day sort of stay awake for 3 days.
Fuck yeah, that's my group, boy.
And it's astonishing, like what just lack of sleep can do to your attention span, memory, those sorts of things. But he talks about so it's a 12-day study.
Yeah.
And they do this test when they're fully rested. So they do a full night, 8 hours sleep for the first night. They do this test. It's a 10-minute test.
Yeah.
They do it every single day for the 12 days they're in the study.
Yeah.
And then all other things are controlled. And all they're looking at is reaction time to you seeing a light on the screen and you clicking a button.
Yeah.
So obviously, full 8 hours sleep, everyone gets a good score. The person who's doing obviously the 3-day deprivation of sleep. So after the first night, they've decreased their action time, and they call them little micro sleeps where they actually miss the beat completely.
Wow.
By 400% after one night of no sleep.
Fuck.
Right. And then they go into, this more staggering thing was that the people who were sleeping 4 and 6 hours, so if you're somebody who sleeps 6 hours a night, by day 10, you are the equivalent of having an all-nighter.
Wow.
So that's where
I do that from time to time. The
But
6
doesn't
hours.
that depend on your circadian rhythm? Like if you feel rested after 6 hours and someone else feels rested after 8 hours, isn't that?
Yeah,
Is
and
there
this
any
is another thing,
equivalency?
Yeah, so this is another thing he talked about. So there's we have this sleep, I don't want to say genetic sort of inbuilt predisposition, but he talks about people having 30% of us are night owls. We generally just don't want to sleep before 11 or 12. Like we just sort of
that's
wired that
Delby.
way.
Yeah.
Some people are morning people. So if you're a morning person, you're generally in bed like me. I'm usually in bed by 8:39, 9:30 latest.
Yeah.
And then I'm up early. And then there's sort of a hybrid between the two.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, in our society, the people who are night owls have got jobs to work. So they're normally not falling asleep till 11:30, 12, 1, but then they've got to wake up for work at 5:36.
Yeah.
So these people are on chronic sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
So they don't function well. Their memory's poor, things like that, right? So there's probably some sort of for you probably are a night owl. So maybe you sleeping till 8 o'clock in the day is probably better if you can actually get to sleep.
Yeah.
But then my psychologist, who I'm seeing for ADHD as well, I don't read anything I read everything to get smart. I don't read fiction to escape. That's my running. I'm reading a lot of self-help books in bed.
Yeah.
It's cut that out straight away.
Wow.
Stop listening to
Oh,
podcasts. Stop doing self-help books at night because you're the sort of person who's wired to engage that, and then you try and fall asleep. You're trying to think, and you especially would be thinking what do I need to do tomorrow? What can I change? How do I get better?
That's where I'm my most creative. Is my creativity and my flow comes.
Yeah.
Is that the
night.
alpha and beta state? Do they waver closer to a certain point of your
Well,
falling
do you mean
asleep?
waking state or sleeping state?
No, isn't it alpha and beta states?
Well, there's
I don't know
there's
enough about
5 stages of sleep, and there's obviously one through 5, and then you got your non-rapid eye movement sleep and your rapid eye movement sleep. And your non-rapid eye movement sleep is your light sleep, whereas your REM sleep is your dream state. So, when you drink, for example, you don't get REM sleep. You don't get that deep sleep where you're dreaming.
Yeah.
And that's when your recovery is poor. So I was talking to you boys before the potty about I wear a Whoop to track on my sleep. And when I know I'm not drinking or anything, things like that, I'm eating well and I'm training, my sleep scores are much better. I survive quite well on 6.5. If I get 7 hours sleep in a night, I'm doing well. Never get 8 hours. I just can't. But I function better on 7.5.
Is that or you're not through time deprivation, you time poor, or just
I wouldn't say time poor to some degree. Most nights I'm getting home from work at 8. So then you're up early, but so you got time there. However, when I've had a fair few big weeks like most people, you might get the occasional where your body just shuts down. You do get a good solid 8 hours.
Yeah.
That's very rare.
So Whoop is that thing on your wrist?
Yeah. So that's tracking. Yeah,
There it
Whoop.
is.
And it just came out to be one of the most accurate. I think the most accurate in research in regards to tracking heart rate and heart rate variability.
And how does that measure sleep through heart rate?
So heart rate variability is taking in all facets like your respiration rate at night. So when I drink, so I'll show you, maybe put up at the podcast at the end, but on a good night's sleep, my recovery is sort of 75, 80% and above. Very rarely do I get to 90. But on a poor night, my recovery is 9%. On a big night, I don't get past 10%. So these big red 10%, anything under sort of 25, 30% is red. The heart rate variability goes up. So it goes down, sorry. So heart rate variability is your ability to perform and your willingness to go out and prepare and to do things well. So the more variability, the better you are ready to perform. Right. So the more stable and more consistent your heart rate is, generally that's poor heart rate variability, which means you're stressed, cortisol levels are high, autonomic.
Isn't that against popular theory where if you want a low resting heart rate, that's a good thing?
No, low resting heart rate it's a sign of general cardiac fitness if you don't have some sort of bradycardia, which is obviously a condition where you have low heart rate naturally. So there's that as well. But yeah, the sleep element is so critical, and trying to get people to understand the food you eat before bed. And we've all heard the food you eat before bed, sugar and caffeine,
is there a
alcohol.
time an optimal time where you should eat and finish and not have anything before you go to bed?
The general consensus from everything I've read over the years has been sort of 3 hours.
Wow.
2.5, 3 hours.
What about when you're
before
starving?
bed.
Shouldn't you eat when you're hungry? Because there's last night I was fucking so
Well, it depends.
so hungry.
Are you
man.
starving though?
No,
Or
my
are
stomach
you?
was telling me.
You're not starving. You've got plenty of fat tissue, mate, to get through a night's sleep. So And I've obviously done fasting for 3 days on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
And when you get into the third night of fasting, that is when sleep becomes harder.
Yeah.
Usually the first 2 nights are okay, but the third night is definitely harder from that perspective of hunger.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for you, someone like trying to reduce all those things, like obviously regular exercise, all the cliche stuff, regular exercise, reduce caffeine, reduce refined foods are obviously terrible.
Yeah.
So
That's one thing I've been good at since Dr. Chafee was cutting out processed food
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So that's been good. But I reckon my recovery in the last 3 days is at like 4% if I had to measure it. Because Sunday I got home like 3:30 in the morning. I was up early. Then Tuesday I couldn't sleep till really late. I got home at like 1 a.m. and was up at 7.
Yeah.
Not rested. And then last night I've had 3 hours sleep. So people will hear my drowsiness in my voice.
Yeah, and like you're looking at like 4 days, 5 days to turn that around in terms of like actually feeling normal again.
Yeah.
That's
now,
the big difference.
You said before, like, I was actually chatting with Taryn, one of our Patreons, the other day, and she said that there was some sort of study for natural night owls links back to back in the day when we were hunter-gatherers, whatever our roles were. Have you learned anything about that? Like, because I'm super active from that 8 till 12, maybe my genetics back in the past was...
I'm not an expert on it. I know that in Dr. Matthews' book, Why We Sleep, if you want to know about sleep or you struggle with it, definitely read this book. But he does talk about like the ancestral side of things and circadian rhythm and how we sort of evolved. But I can't go into full detail and to like answer that question in particular and go, this is particularly why.
Yeah.
But evolutionary reasons why. But so in the book, he talks about we have like a genetic predisposition in our circadian rhythm to actually want to sleep at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
No, that's me, big time.
Yeah,
So
all the time.
It's
Yeah.
on the walk.
Yeah, see it?
You work in fucking Portugal or something like that. Like, I've been to Portugal, like those people, they don't start till 11 and they're having an siesta at like 3. Like, guys, I want to go to your cafe. Like, can you open up? Like,
Yeah.
I've even found that in Perth, which is hell annoying. If I want to go somewhere and work at 4 o'clock, every cafe shuts.
Yeah.
There's nowhere. So if you're a cafe owner, fucking
open up.
there's
Sort
a
your shit
target
out.
market there. Honestly.
So yeah, he talks about that in the book. So yeah, it's just interesting. Like sometimes it can be like we get that sort of lull in the afternoon, and majority of the people it's because of the food they're eating.
Yeah.
Okay, obviously the high sugar.
Crash.
You get that sort of like blood sugar response. But he did say we are somewhat wired to be having a sort of siesta in the afternoon. That's what we sort of have always done evolutionary wise.
It would make sense because if you're up when the sun's up, which is
early.
everyone, then you've been up for X amount of hours and you know that potentially you're going to have to store energy for nighttime if predators are coming or whatever. So you would want a natural lull in the afternoon. And if that's when animals are sleeping as well.
And what's the optimal time again for a nap? Because I know it is beneficial to have those little naps, but not past a certain time period.
Past 20 minutes or something, hey?
Pardon?
Was it past 20 minutes it's detrimental?
No. So there seems to be an optimal range of like that 20 to 25 and a 90 minutes. So in between, like the 60 minutes seems to be offsetting. Like it doesn't seem to get like you wake up a bit groggy. Depends because you're probably going to fall into like a REM sleep where you get into that deep state.
And then you start coming back out of it.
Yeah, and people who don't sleep well are just naturally fatter. Like if you don't sleep well, you don't get the recoverability of like your hormones. So your hormones obviously play a massive role. So one thing I liked about Dr. Anthony Chafee he was talking about obviously like the calories in, calories out. I'm on the fence now. Like I've been doing this for 15 years and I used to be like, yep, calories in, calories out's the answer. And then I've gone the other way and gone, nah, it's not about calories at all. It's all about hormones. Yeah. So I think you've got to probably take them both into consideration. But
I think it's good that you're able to change your opinion as well because you're a pretty strong, headstrong dude.
Yeah, I think I've said some terrible things to people in the past, especially early days, like in the first probably 5. If you're out there looking and you got a trainer, if they haven't had more than 10 years experience and you want to get really good results, probably go somewhere else. Yeah. Like, I mean, it takes a long time to acquire a lot of knowledge and experience. But what I did like about that was he's talked about sort of hormonal balance as well being important, and calories in, calories out. It's not necessarily everything. Yeah. Because you can eat calories of whatever you like, really, and still gain weight. So it's a massive part of nutrition, and everything we consume has a metabolic hormonal response in our body.
What hormones do you know much about that side of thing? Like what are the hormones that?
Yeah, well, going back to the sleep point. So cortisol is obviously a stress hormone, which is obviously reducing the adrenal glands and things like that. So that's your fight or flight response. And so going back to the point where if you don't sleep well, they reckon in the last sort of 3 to 4 hours of sleep, if you're getting 8 hours, that's where that hormonal repair sort of generally happens, where you get your upregulation of growth hormone, cortisol tends to suppress. Cortisol is a bit higher in the morning from memory, and then testosterone a little bit later. They could be flipped from memory. But But yeah, cortisol is obviously one of the massive ones. So if you're not getting that adequate amount of sleep, like let's say less than 6 hours a night, you're sort of robbing yourself of, being leaner and getting rid of fat mass easier than someone who's sleeping, say, 7 to 8 hours a night.
Are you across much of what Huberman's been saying with the sunlight in the morning to help set your circadian rhythm?
Yeah, and that's something that Matthew Walk talks about as well. So that sort of initiates that sort of onset of waking the circadian rhythm, and the same at night. So when you're if you're sitting at home and you struggle to sleep, be in a room as dark as physically possible. So because the light actually sort of keeps that sort of melatonin sort of higher.
Yep.
So having like screens and like bright lamps in your room, like you hear about LeBron James when he travels, he does this thing where he basically calls hotels ahead of time and he goes, he wants every light out of the room just so he knows he can get for complete darkness. The room's set. So like for sleep, like top 5 things are make sure the room's temperature controlled. So 20 to 21 degrees seems optimal. Dark as possible. Sort of all electronic devices obviously away from yourself. And I think the most important thing is trying to get a routine. So if you don't have a routine, he always comes back to that sort of point of like, look, if you don't have a good sleep hygiene routine where you're going to bed early, you're reading a book, like reading a book puts me to sleep. So I find it very hard to sort of read more than 15 minutes. Yeah. Some people are like that.
Yep.
Something cathartic about it, like sort of your eyes sort of moving across the page. But some people can like have a TV on in the background and that puts them to sleep. Yeah. So there's obviously slightly individual here, but there's some of the key things that he sort of talks about in there anyway.
Well, that's what my routine would be. It'd be like I sometimes get stuck. Me and Delby fucking go on a message tangent back and forth, like coming up with ideas for pods or whatever. But it'll always be when I'm done, put the TV on sleep, 30 minutes, and I turn on a TV show I've seen fucking 100 times. Yeah. And I put that on in the background, turns off. Now, I know that's probably not the most ideal way to fall asleep, but I find it incredibly easy to fall asleep like that. So,
and masturbation helps.
But that's
both sexes.
So I don't know, is that a poor thing to do? Because I know there would be a lot of people, and actually I do know there's a lot of people who do the exact same thing, listen to TV.
Look, I think it really, it's a cliche answer, but if it works for you and you are waking up well rested and the screen isn't like in your face, I think like a lot of the research I've done is with iPads and reading a book. So you're reading a hard physical book versus reading an iPad. And they found that if you're reading an iPad, that melatonin response is suppressed for like 2 or 3 hours after using that iPad. Now, whether or not it's a blue light or the content you're reading is up for debate. But then they know that if you're reading a physical book, which is sort of what I like to, I don't use iPads to read, but I use a physical book, that is far better. But then once again, if you've got an iPad on, so here's like, there's so many conflicting things with everything you do, right? But if you have an iPad on, there's probably no other lights on in the room. It's probably just completely black. But if you've got reading a book, you need a light on. Yeah. So whether that is a difference or not, I don't know. But
and you want to increase melatonin.
Yeah, you want to increase melatonin, and obviously that's like the gun that sort of starts a race. It gets you to sort of prepare for sleep. It doesn't help you sleep. It helps you sort of fall asleep, and then from there it's
without being like taking the piss. Masturbation for dudes or ejaculating for men doesn't that release a hormone that wants you to sleep? Do you know anything about that?
No, I can't answer that. Like I know that obviously testosterone is important for health and those sorts of things, but I can't answer that question.
I mean, it's a hell good excuse for us to be like, look, I can't go again. It's my hormones.
I think everyone would say they definitely feel tired. I think everyone's like, you generally feel like a sensing of calm and you're definitely more relaxed afterwards.
Yeah.
Now, with that 4 days of like trying to get your sleep back to normal after like drinking or whatever, I heard a study that said that you can catch up on sleep, which is indirect conflict.
We're experiencing. So Dale was experiencing brain fatigue.
Right now,
and his reaction times are very poor based on these last sleep.
Lucky my job's not clicking lights on the screen.
Exactly, for 10 minutes straight.
I'm glad I'm switching today.
But the old theory apparently is you can't catch up on sleep, but I've heard new theories that you can actually catch up on sleep that you missed. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is obviously what I've read is in traveling athletes. So when you're traveling through like different time states and time zones. So like if you go fly back from like over east in Melbourne to Perth and you lose 3 hours, for every hour you lose, it takes a day to reset and get back on track.
Wow.
Crazy, eh? So like 3 hours from Melbourne, when obviously the time zone is 3 as daylight savings. Yeah, you're looking at 3 days to sort of get yourself back on track in terms of regular sleep, getting good quality, right? So yeah, going back to your point about what was your question? Sorry,
Catching up on sleep.
yeah. So they have done that in a lot of high level players where they obviously induce naps as much as possible to try and like sleep. They talk about like banking sleep.
Yeah,
credits.
the banking sleep is what I heard. Like
Yeah,
you
like-
can't bank sleep, but you can catch up.
you
was
can,
what I
you can
thought,
definitely you can definitely speed the process up. Like if you're like if napping too late is bad. Like so, going to your point earlier. Like if you were have a nap at say 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to ruin that night's sleep without a doubt.
Yeah,
But if
okay.
you have that nap early enough in the day, like if you have that luxury of doing that, most people don't have the luxury of doing
Yeah.
that.
West Coast have been doing that for the whole year.
Yeah, last couple of years probably. So I think there's definitely some research to suggest that you can definitely bank credits of sleep and catch up and recover quicker. Like if you're not, think about it, right? So if you're getting 6 hours a night or less than for say 4 or 5 days, and all of a sudden then start to chuck in some naps when you get chance to for a couple of days in sequence, so then you go like say an hour and a half in the middle of the day and you're 6.5 or 6 at night, you're getting 7.5, 8 hours across that period of time. So it would make sense that recovery should be there in terms of like hard fact, science and articles I can refer to right now. Off the top of my head. A side point, a lot of podcasts, Joe Rogan's podcasts, they just have people now with a TV screen pulling up articles for pretty much the whole podcast now. So you can just pull up, you can just do all your research prior, pull up an article and go, yep, this is my point. This is an article that proves it.
Yeah.
I found that quite interesting, really. Like there's someone just sort of pulling up articles that they can produce. Obviously,
That's because they have this thing called money.
they have it.
Where they pay a producer.
so anyone who's listening to this podcast, can we get some sponsorships to try and get these boys a live screen so we can just fire up articles?
I did heard. I heard Athletic Institute was. Pretty keen.
Yeah, we can talk later.
But yeah, so on the recovery side of things, so sorry, no,
No, go.
yeah, because with recovery, obviously sleep is probably the
number one.
The number one.
I'm going to put it as number one.
So
from all my research and everything that I've done myself, like if you get a poor night's sleep, like like the next day you're more likely to eat poor food. You're you're much more moodier. Tolerance just goes down significantly, and then you pile that look at a new parent, right? New parents struggle big time, like with mental health, because they're just sleep deprived constantly. Like I'm not a parent myself yet, but I can imagine when I get to that point, like I can see it's very easy to sit on the outside and judge, but when you don't get good sleep, things are very hard. Soreness goes up. Like I've got arthritis in my ankle, so I know that when I drink alcohol, I limp the next day. If I don't get good sleep, I'm limping the next day.
I get limp on alcohol as well.
You're not the only one.
So I guess the general idea or the general rule would be to have a pretty reasonable routine, avoid as much caffeine as late as possible, and then as little light as possible.
Luckily,
that's a pretty broad.
West Coast started their recovery in the second quarter against North Melbourne. They fucking Nick Napanui'd. But that is interesting that you say that, man. 1 hour costs us a day. That means that Fremantle and West Coast are travelling every week. Every 10 days or 11 days.
Yep.
So we're always playing catch up. So our premiership should be worth two. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because I actually sat next to a captain on the plane going back from Melbourne just recently, and because I was always wondered, like, what is the altitude in an actual airplane in the cabin? So we have an altitude room at AI, and we get that up to sort of 3,500 meters of altitude. So obviously when you fly in a plane, you're at like 35,000, 40,000 feet, which is very high altitude.
But they control the oxygen, right?
Yeah, they control the cabin pressure, and they control, but you're sitting at around 2,000 meters of altitude in an airplane. So to give that perspective, so if I'm riding a bike at sea level, like I am in Perth right now, I'm on a watt bike and I'm pushing say 100 watts, my heart rate might be say 110 beats.
Yeah.
At 2,000 meters altitude, my heart rate's probably 130.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm having to work harder.
Is that because of oxygen deprivation?
No, it's because of it's a concentration of
pressure
oxygen in the air. Yeah, so the pressure at which the oxygen is getting pushed into us is now somewhat reduced.
Yeah.
So we're not getting enough in. So that's why if I know my metrics very well. So if I fly, I can look at my heart rate and go, normally at rest it's 50 when I'm sitting up, 45 in bed laying when I'm sleeping. But if I'm sitting up in a plane, it's like 65.
So the maths or the logic behind that is because air goes from high pressure to low pressure.
Correct.
If you're higher in the air pressure is lower,
which means
means that you have to work harder to suck it in to get it in.
Correct, and which is why obviously when you climb Everest, like as you move up the mountain, the partial pressure of oxygen in the air gets a lot less, which means it can't push it in.
Yeah.
Which means you now have to work a lot harder, which is why your heart rate goes up.
Yeah.
So we have a normal barrack chamber at AI, which is different, where we're just pushing more nitrogen into the room to lower the percentage of oxygen, so that you have to work harder.
Yeah. So it's like it's almost like cheating with the training, so doing extra work in a.
Correct. So if someone's like really unfit, you can get them to cycle at a very easy power.
Yeah.
But they've got to work like 15, 20 beats, even sometimes 30 beats harder for a very easy given exercise output.
Yeah.
Because the input's the heart rate, right? So
is that why they used to go and train at high altitude for like AFL teams would go over
they do.
Colorado?
A lot of clubs now have their own altitude chambers.
But they lose that almost like within 2 weeks of coming back, hey?
Yeah, so you've only got optimal time of doing it. So you can only, so they reckon you either fly, do altitude and then fly back and do the competition within a couple of days.
Yeah.
Or you do it within 2 weeks, like at the back end of 2 weeks ideally, so you've actually got the time to adapt to the stress.
Swanee was talking about that on his pod. He's like, Dad flies over, we go to the Grand Canyon, bust our asses, and then you just lose it when I came back. So he goes, I just didn't bother because I knew I was going to lose it.
Yeah, it never made sense to me while I did that. So like, if you want to do it, you want to do it around with like a grand final or a really important final. I don't see round one. Yeah, it's great to win a couple of games round one, but I just always found that weird. So, but back to your point with teams flying, like West Coast are at a disadvantage and Free are at a disadvantage in that regard because they do. Dehydration occurs on a plane. You know, obviously, if you're not sort of looking out for sodium and magnesium, all those sorts of things for hydration purposes. But being in altitude is more stressful. And then obviously, if you're flying back from Melbourne, you're losing that time, and then that sleep time, which Matthew Walker talks about in his book, it's going to take you a couple of days to recover from that particular flight.
So, so you're going to go on. So, what I was going to go on from there, because we're talking recovery, and this is obviously another important factor in recovery, and this is less just general life health. This is probably better for, well, actually maybe not, maybe not just for elite athletes and athletics and stuff like that, but sauna, ice bath. We sort of touched on it with a couple of recent guests, but I thought we'd wait to have you on because you could probably discuss it in more depth. But like, what are the benefits, firstly, for like recovery after a game of footy? The differences between an ice bath and a sauna, because they're pretty similar, are they?
No, like I've always sort of said to people that if you want to recover better after a game, like it depends on when you're doing it. So everything here is context. So immediately after a game, some people do like to have an ice bath, and I could see the point in that. In terms of like the following day, like for me, I prefer a sauna. So especially like an infrared, where you're sitting in a room, we're sitting in obviously a sauna where the temperature can be sort of 60 to 70 degrees Celsius. And obviously if you're in there for long enough, your heart rate climbs. So you go from sort of sitting at 60 and mine will get to sort of 120, 130 sitting in a sauna. So you get this sort of elevated heart rate. Okay, so you get this oxygenation of blood moving around the system without even moving, which is great. So, but in terms of recovery, like movement's number one. You just need to move the next day. So like facilitate recovery, low heart rate. So whether it be like a beach walk, an easy ride, an easy swim, saunas are great because it still elevates a heart rate. You're not necessarily moving, but definitely sauna is. I mean, there's so much research, more research now coming out about saunas. Reduce blood pressure, reduce anxiety, reduce stress, longevity. All these sorts of things are starting to be seen with sauna. You got to do it frequently. Like a lot of the research is saying 3 to 4 times a week.
Yep. So I've brought mine down to about 20 to 30 minute sessions a week, which is somewhere between 60 to 90 minutes, which is
really good.
I'm going off Herberman all the time. It seems to be pretty good.
No, it's definitely that's where a lot of the research is saying. Like in places like Finland, like it's just a known thing that the majority of the population, I think it's something like over 90% of the population have at least one sauna a week. But then there's like a vast majority, of people who are doing sort of 3 to 4, 5 saunas a week. And they're just finding like lots of low blood pressure is massive, so that's coming down.
Yeah, so moving away from just recovery, just for general health, because longevity studies are showing that the people like that are living longer. And so, what are the just for sauna? We'll stick with sauna for now. Like, what are the health benefits?
Yeah, so you would have heard of probably heat shock proteins.
Yeah, we touched on it a few weeks ago, but again, if you could go deeper into it.
Yeah, I'll try. So basically, heat shock proteins are really good at facilitating recovery in the sense that they sort of attach themselves to protein molecules. And so when you go through like muscle repair, you can get like this degradation of proteins in some degree, but they seem that heat shock proteins are really good at facilitating better trying to think of the word, like generation of protein synthesis and things like that. In regard, that's probably butchering it a little bit. That's definitely a big part of it. But just getting the body adapted to the stress of the heat is huge. So like anything in life, if you're adapting yourself to stresses, other things become a lot easier, right? So if you protect something, it generally gets weaker, which is necessarily not always a good thing.
Yeah.
So which is why we want to pick up weights.
So it's a bit almost like if you don't use it, you lose it style thing. Like you're sort of constantly building up almost an immunity.
You're building up
strength.
a resilience. You're building up a resilience to certain things. And obviously, if someone's capable of dealing with more harsher environments in their day-to-day life, things become a lot easier. They become a lot healthier. There's a lot of so going back to like the sauna stuff, there's a lot of benefits showing that like the mental clarity, especially anxiety and stress. A lot of people obviously are quite anxious these days. That seems to be a really positive response from having the infrared saunas. Now, infrareds, they've got you've got near wave, because it's all like electromagnetic sort of waves. You got short waves, medium waves, and long waves. And mostly infrareds are going to be the long wave infrared saunas. Which compared to a traditional sauna, so like an infrared sauna generally sort of heats the body up that you would have heard from the inside. Like it's a more overall, you're getting like a lot more, the heat's dispersed more evenly across the sauna.
Okay.
Whereas in a traditional sauna, they can be very hot, like 83 degrees plus. But the saunas are generally very hot at the top. If you go down, they're actually not quite hot. So if you want to like relieve yourself in a sauna, actually no, I shouldn't. If you want to relieve the heat stress in the sauna, like obviously you come down lower in a traditional sauna, so you can sit down lower. Obviously it's not as hot air rises. But in infrared, like it seems to be a much more even spread, and it seems to heat the tissue up deeper than a traditional. And traditional saunas can be quite stuffy as well. Whereas infrared, you don't get that, so humidity, which is great as well.
If you want to heat yourself up from the inside out in America, just go to East Palestine in Ohio. And
Fuck yeah.
they'll do it for you naturally.
Oh my Lord, that is a terrible situation. But so I guess when it comes to the infrared versus the standard, when you say it's like cooking you almost from the inside.
It's like a microwave.
Is that better for blood flow, for the stress relief, for the anxiety helping, or like is there toxin?
And is it unnatural because infrared doesn't occur?
Because like toxins and stuff out of your body through the sweat, is that a thing as well, or are they completely unrelated?
Yeah, so a lot of the times you hear people say, I'm going to have a sauna because they want to sweat out. They usually had a bender and like, I'm going to sit in a sauna, and which if you're doing that, it's probably more detrimental than anything, because one, you're already dehydrated. You've been drinking alcohol all night, terrible food choices, poor sleep. Then you go, jumping in a sauna, especially a traditional one, is very stressful. Like like my last, I did Ironman Cairns and I did 10 days. So research said, if you do sort of 10 days in a sauna in a row at 83 degrees for 20 minutes, you get really good heat shock protein adaptation. You adapt to the heat stress a lot better. So I did that prior to going to Cairns. But I come out of that, I did it probably too close to the race. I come out of the saunas. So 10 days in a row I did it at a local centre, and got sick basically on arrival in Cairns. Now, that to associate causality is pretty hard there, but I definitely reckon that having a sauna it's like I'm watching my heart rate climb. And if anyone's been in a sauna for 20 minutes at 83 degrees,
like a long time.
Yeah.
That last 5 minutes, the first 10 goes by like no worries.
Yeah.
And then 10 to 15 gets pretty challenging, but then like 15 to 20, like you want to get out. Like you're just trying to just sit there and go and hold. So it is very stressful.
Now, is there a difference between me going 2 10-minute blocks or 20 minutes or 2 15-minute blocks, or is it?
I think from what I read, it's just cumulative time. So like you're probably not gonna, your heart rate's probably not going to climb as high, like because you're not sitting in that room and the heart rate doesn't have to work as hard. So your heart rate wouldn't get as high. So you're probably not going to get that sort of benefit. And obviously you can get some fat oxidation stuff sitting in a sauna. So obviously if your heart rate's nice, and it would sort of put you in that sort of fat oxidation zone where you like your heart rate's 130.
Such a lazy way to get skinny.
Yeah, but most people who are doing it obviously aren't eating right but they go in there to help.
I think the most stressful thing about a sauna is all the naked old men you have to speak to.
Because
I loves it. Networking.
Well, you made a good point there, because the benefits I've started to feel now are probably more in line with me changing everything else, not just doing the sauna, because I've been doing sauna regularly for 4 or 5 years.
I've got mates that have been getting cooked for 4 or 5 years.
But so that I felt a bit better for it, but now I've also put in place, eating better, drinking better water, exercising more regularly, gym.
Yep.
I'm feeling it's just an addition. It's an extra level of helping my body. Whereas before it was one thing, but it wasn't wasn't in line with what I'm trying to do in the other aspects of my life. So it's probably,
let's be very clear. If you eat terribly, you don't exercise, you don't train, and you think a sauna is going to change the way you live your life or change your physical and mental state, it may do to a very small degree, but that's not going to be the...
So like having a coconut water after a large pizza...
Probably not going to work.
Is it like that? I think we... I've talked about this. You've got to earn your beers and you go and have a run before. I think you've spoken about this. Doesn't work, eh?
No. That definitely doesn't work. Alcohol is a poison. Let's be very clear. And it ruins everything. Jobs, lives, homes, body fat percentage, sleep. There's nothing good. I mean,
if you've got a negative attitude.
Depends how you want to look at it. And look, I think most...
Fucking pessimist.
I'm reading a book about climate change, and there was some random stat in there about in 2020, Australia was the worst for drinking. So we are the worst country for. So I think she stated that.
Or the best at drinking.
Well, depends how you want to look at it, right? So,
pessimistic.
Apparently, Australians throughout their calendar year will have at least 27 occasions on average where they're getting like obliterated
Every 2 weeks.
Wow. Every couple of weeks, most people are going out and getting drunk.
How many weeks in here? 54 or
52
so nearly,
weeks. Yeah, basically,
weeks,
basically every 2 weeks.
And how many Australians did you say? What percentage?
It was just across.
And how many immigrants?
How many? What was the percentage?
25%.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy.
So a quarter of Australia was getting obliterated 50% of the year.
I love how they're blaming drunk
weekends.
Australians on climate change.
There's a random spin-off on her take on global on climate change.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all bullshit anyway. But
yeah. Well,
we can.
that's a
Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah,
we can talk about it later.
Well, yeah.
Or another time.
Let's try and draw it back to the sort of carnivore conversation. So,
hang on one sec. The sauna, the heat shock proteins.
Yes.
Now, this is a new fad word that I've found that's getting thrown around. Cold shock proteins and heat shock proteins. What the fuck are they?
Oh, we sort of half talked about that when
did?
you're in the
you were in
toilet.
the toilet, yeah.
All right.
But like, I'm not an expert on it, but essentially, like they're proteins that sort of attach themselves. So they're molecules that attach themselves to proteins, which can help facilitate recovery.
Okay.
So like and they help maintain homeostasis. So you know what homeostasis is.
Yeah,
so in the process of maintaining homeostasis, that's what they're
for the listeners that don't know homeostasis.
To try and keep your body wants to be in a nice state of balance and equilibrium at all times from an alkaline pH perspective. So the good thing about like ice baths is they can sort of make you more sort of alkaline rather than more acidic.
Is that true? Because I always thought our body wasn't like acidic or basic.
It moves very it's a very small line. I think it's 6.7 pH or 7.1.
I think we're 7.5, but our gut. So that's the funny thing is like I fell for this whole like alkaline water sort of craze idea, and I still think there's benefits to drinking that water because it's the other stuff that's going into it. But your gut is at a 1.5 pH, which is acidic as fuck. It's like putting and so important. Everything you eat goes into that first anyway, so it's becoming acidic as fuck, and then through the process it turns back into it. So just because you're putting in alkaline into your gut,
it's probably not even a good thing to do.
It's not going to have an effect.
You need acid to break your food down, so to make your stomach less acidic. This means you're going to digest your food more poorly.
Yeah. The whole idea of something is to literally break down food chemically, so then you can utilize the energy. Right? That's the whole premise of it, right? So, but I think they're more talking about like in response to like immune system response. Like they're showing that like, obviously brown fat sort of adapts better with cold immersion. So yeah, and obviously like a lot more white blood cells. So people who like ice bath frequently have an increase in white blood cells, which is protecting mechanism to some degree. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there. Like the science of it is still relatively like new. Like
I'm amazed at how they find these things. Like how do they fucking locate a heat shock protein? Like
biopsies. So they just fucking get in there and they just cut you open.
So me and you were talking about just while we're on ice baths, like cold showers and stuff, and how in Perth we do not have cold showers.
If you're in Perth and you have any cold shower, you are not having a cold shower. So
it's still cold.
It is
compared to the environment.
Well, compared to a hot shower, it's cold. Yeah. But when I went to Melbourne for Christmas, and mate, that is ice coming out of the showers over there. So if you're in Victoria, you're doing ice.
save money on an ice bath.
Yeah, you don't trust me. You're psyching yourself up. Like you're doing your breath work prior. You're going like this is cold, and you turn it on full cold, and it's ice coming out. And then I came back to Perth. I just have straight cold now. I just turn it on straight and cold, jump straight in.
I
Don't worry about
do
it.
not struggle at all with a cold shower here. But in winter, that will be...
Summer's easy.
Yeah.
It's like, have a cold shower in summer is the easiest thing in the world. Let's see how many heroes are there around winter.
But it's good to start getting used to. Rather baby steps. I've been every morning I do a cold shower.
What is the science? Do you know much of the science behind that?
Yeah, so not all of it. Obviously, it's not an area. I'm an expert in strength conditioning.
Yes,
that's my expertise.
But you're doing pretty well, mate. I've
still got to broaden my horizon and read other things. And obviously, ice baths. My first ice bath was when I was 15, playing state footy. Yeah. And back I didn't know anything about ice baths. I didn't know they existed. Yeah. And they had a bathtub filled full of ice, and they said lay in it. I'm like, what? Why do I want to lay in it? Then I laid it up to my neck. I'm like, why would anyone do this? Like, this is ridiculous. And now it's a phenomenon where people like Wim Hof have obviously made it famous. Mm-hmm. He's probably the most common person you think of.
His brother lives in Perth as well.
Really?
Or from the majority of the year. So I should hook you up with him.
There you go. That'd be awesome. If we could do that, that'd be really good. But yeah, like I think if you're someone who's taking yourself into an uncomfortable environment, you're probably someone who's doing a lot of things right on the outside as well, like trying to eat well and exercise. But yeah, so the cold water immersion, they talk about developing, like I said, the brown fat before, which is a good. So if you look in the brain, there's you get grey matter and white matter, all this stuff, and the brown fat seems to be quite good. And then obviously the immune response, they talk about certain hormones that are like cortisol comes down, so stress hormones come down. And then it's still relatively. The science on it is very it's hard to find good evidence, right? And Wim Hof has done multiple things where he's been under experiments where one of the experiments was through breath work and cold water training. He basically was, have you guys read his book?
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't read his book, but keep going because I think I know what you're about to say.
Well, there's multiple times where he's been stuck in an ice. So he did 80 minutes at 0 degrees and after 5 minutes, he should have been going into starting hypothermia and going into hypothermia.
Well, he climbed, was it Everest?
Yeah,
in
he
his shorts?
He did a marathon barefoot in snow, which is ridiculous. But one of the main things was through breath work and cold water immersion, he was in his book saying that he went into a clinical trial where they injected people with the virus. There was 1,500 people.
What, they just signed up?
Literally.
For which virus?
I can't remember the name of the virus off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It was just like a common flu from memory. It wasn't anything too obviously serious.
Yes.
But they basically injected all these patients with this common flu. And then everyone, of all the participants, they all got sick and all got symptoms. And he's going through his breath work while they're administering this. So this is where I can see why people think he's a charlatan and it's all made up. But he's going through his breath work. He's lowering his heart rate. He's going into full Zen mode, gets the injection and doesn't get any sort of responses, doesn't get sick. They're like, what's going on? And he was wide up to the nines. They're taking his blood.
Yeah, they couldn't understand it.
They couldn't understand it. They're medical doctors are going what? How have you done this? So they
his body fought off the injection.
Yeah, and he taught it to other people in the same. They were able to have the same experience.
So to prove him wrong, he's like, well, it's not. I'm not an anomaly. I'm not a genetic freak. So he goes, give me a couple of weeks, and I'll train 7 people to do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I said, no, we'll give you 4 days. He's like, all right, 4 days it is. And then
why would
mate, I don't
fucking lose it? If you're a scientist, you would be fucking oath. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's check this. Yeah, but no, fucking 4 days.
But if they had ADHD, those scientists.
All those 4 people didn't get any symptoms or.
That's insane.
So, but look
this book sounds like a breath of fresh air. If you ask me. So,
definitely.
What is he doing? Is he breathing out the
So, Andrew Huberman did a really good podcast, which people should listen to about breath work, and he sort of divulges all of them. From the breathwork side, he's trying to get carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is what makes you breathe. So it obviously builds up in the system, and that's what causes you to sort of breathe, not oxygen. So through when you practice his breath work, you're basically trying to offload a lot of the carbon dioxide, which means you can sort of start to hold your breath for longer. You don't need oxygen for longer. In terms of I can't remember why the mechanism was in the book, why he sort of said that he could fight it off.
Yeah,
I'll have to go back and refer to it. But it was just fascinating to read that someone through breath work and ice cold plunges could do something like that.
I don't know why, but breathwork triggers me. I think I spoke about this with Dr. Ryan Gleason that we had on.
Oh, you mean like a
Like just watching guys go through breath work, it's very triggering for me. I feel like it's just so
Watching people doing it, or just you doing it?
Nah, just watching people
okay.
get all emotional and shit.
Oh, you mean those groups,
Yeah.
and then filming it, and then you were talking about
Yeah,
like,
I don't know why
it takes away
emotional experiences where they're like crying
Yeah.
and losing control.
Yeah,
That's definitely.
I don't know why. I think it might just be the type of person that
You're skeptical.
puts it across.
Yeah, and I think
So-
like, I'm a skeptic, so I don't believe in a lot of things. Like I need to really sort of get into the weeds of things and see it work. And I think with anything in life, if people don't see an immediate benefit, they're probably not going to carry it on.
Yeah.
We want to see an immediate benefit. So you do breath work, you can go from holding your breath from 1 minute to within 3 minutes. So you can go from holding your breath from 1 minute to 3 minutes in the space of 20 minutes of breath work.
Mm-hmm.
And all you're doing is
Really?
it's incredible, right? But all you need to do is all you're doing is offloading as much carbon dioxide as you can in that breath work.
Yeah.
But if someone holds their breath for 3 minutes and before that they could do it for 1 minute or a minute and a half, they're going, there's instant buy-in.
Yeah.
So there's instant results.
Well, I don't. Oh, sorry. Go.
Wim Hof's a bit more palatable as well because he looks like a rugged mountaineer. He's not like a hip,
dogs like this. Yeah.
He's not like a hippie new age guy that I feel like is just trying to slide into the pants of the other girls doing the breath work.
Well, I don't know whether it was placebo effect or not, but I started using the one that Huberman was talking about with the
What's
that
called
one
again?
final
Yeah.
little bit of extra breath in. And like any stressful moment or any sort of like, I'm overwhelmed or whatever. Like
What
2
do
or
you
3 of
call-
them and bang, I'm feeling good. I don't know if it's placebo or not, but
Yeah, what did he call it again? It's like
Some little double breath.
the double breath. You gave it a name. I can't remember what it was.
parabolic.
The Hooverman.
I don't know.
Yeah, the Huberman.
But once again, like I don't know, like how in depth the weeds are and they are in the science with that. They seem to say like it help. Like if you're someone who is stressful and has anxiety, it can seem to help mitigate that very quickly.
He seems
Hiccups.
to only go off data as well, and
Which is
like,
good.
Which is
But once again, like so coming on this podcast, I was like, well, 15 years of doing this, I've told people to go high carb, low carb, keto, all those types of foods, and I've told people to lift weights this way, that way, run this way, do this way. And what I've always found is that there's always every decision you make, there's a consequence. So if you're reducing something out of your diet, there's usually something you figure out later on that, okay, I actually needed that, so I need to put that back in. But there's always evidence it's hard to find good evidence. If you go on a podcast and someone talks about research, the other person's going, but research is done poorly, so can't we really listen to it? It's funded by this person, it's funded by that person. The study wasn't long enough. So it's very overwhelming as someone who works in this industry to get really good evidence and go, look, this is what we think, which is what a lot of people talk about what they do in practice. Like the results you get with someone physically and you see someone transform their life in front of you by giving them information. I think a lot of people are sort of drawing upon that, like just to guide their practices and things like that.
So many variables. It's almost impossible to just get one independent variable.
And you should
It's
change.
Almost impossible.
If you are going to change it, you should change one thing at a time.
You
you
learn
should not
that in year
change
7 science.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
should change one thing at a time and see if it makes a difference. So
because that's I feel good now because the thing I said the other day was I make small little incremental changes in a lot of different areas over a long time. So now I feel like I've given good advice and not just force my opinion down someone's throat.
exactly. And you should also get some objective data. Subjective data is important because how the person feels, we have to protect people's feelings, and that's how they feel is important. But there's also objective data, right? So if I have a glass of red wine and I know that my heart rate variability and sleep recovery is slightly decreased, I know that. So if I have one, I can get away with it. I can feel a bit iffy the next day, but I'm usually okay. But if I have 2 or 3, then it starts to really decline. But I'm looking at numbers on my phone, right? Because I've got like chronicle data of 3 years. So I'm not talking about like I've worn this for a week and I see one bad night of recovery. I'm like 3 years of data. I know exactly what my sleep is like and what affects my sleep, and what affects my heart rate and what affects those.
And when you said objective, like feelings, like people's feelings don't matter
in the face of facts,
but
correct.
You mean physically, I'm feeling better from this recovery.
Yeah,
not emotionally. I feel unsafe here. By doing this breath work
because feelings are they're subjective, wouldn't they?
Yeah. And if you have objective data to back it up, that's even better. Then you go, well, now I've got more of a case to go, look, this is actually really works. Which is why like all these diets, like carnivore is obviously the one it's very like it's prominent.
So,
what's the word I'm looking for?
Inflammatory.
Anti-inflammatory.
It's in the zeitgeist.
But inflammatory, as in social commentary.
Oh yeah, you talk about like, so there are a lot of good things to carnivore. There are a lot of good things to keto. There are a lot of good things to high carb. There's every diet usually has a really good positive thing out of it, right? So what I've sort of landed on in all my years is that reducing refined stuff is obvious. I think we know that eating real food is obvious. Now the whole carnivore vegan debate, like those two, they get attention because they're polarizing. Like they're polarizing views, and like that guy Anthony came on, he said he eats one meal a day, he eats one steak a day. I'm like, who is going to do that? Who's going to cut out everything in their life and have one steak a day? That is not people are going to be able to follow that.
Yep.
Like, only the extremists, like extreme personalities. Now I'm someone who's very black or white, so I usually 10 years ago, if I listened to a podcast about that, I would have been like, fuck this, I'm carnivore, everything else is wrong. Like that 10 years ago, that was probably me.
Yep.
And I'm someone who's coaching people, right? So for me, the last 10 years, especially my 30s, is trying to find the grey area and then use my subjective and critical analysis and going, well, what is this diet? Why does this work? Well, it works because you're taking out, one, a lot of energy. Two, you're taking out all the refined stuff. Fuck plants might be a bit far. Like, but I get what he's talking about. Like, I understand where he's coming from. But like things like coffee and like these are things that we've obviously evolved to like and enjoy. And so when you start saying cut out coffee, we know coffee, alcohol, all those things aren't good for us long term. We know that. If you have them in excess, that's obviously bad. But like where we are right now, with obviously whether you believe in climate change or not, there's stuff going on there that people need to sort of acknowledge. And obviously lands and grazing, and like one of the things with carnivore is like the things that they're eating are eating grass. I'm like, well, how does that work? And obviously there's like the rumen, and how they digest the food and things like that. So that's obviously a big debate as well. But there's the whole meat premise. So a bit of context here for most people listening. So early 20s, I break an ankle. I can't play sport anymore. So then I just decided to go to university and study. So I do my sports science. I travel to Canada, do part of my degree there, come back, do sports science, do my master's in strength and conditioning. And at this point, I'm just trying to experiment with sport again. So I go through bodybuilding. So I get down to 4% body fat, and I do that by cutting out pretty much all carbohydrates, apart from around training. So I know that reducing, but I'm going from eating probably average food, more refined foods, eating a lot like, fucking chicken and beef every day with small amounts of veggies. And obviously I'm getting down to a very low body fat percentage. Get down to 4%. I do that for 2 years and then go, well, I'm going to go try powerlifting. So now I'm eating lots of carbohydrates. I'm getting fatter. I'm getting bigger. I'm getting stronger. I'm getting stiffer. I'm getting sorer. I'm getting more inflamed. I'm not feeling great, but I'm pushing heavy weight. And I do that for about 2.5 years. And then I go, so around the time of powerlifting, I just built AI, and now I'm at the point where I'm working long days, eating poor food, and I'm not sleeping. My eyes are twitching. My left eye was twitching every night, and like I couldn't sleep. If I did sleep, it was broken. It was like 3 hours a night. Ends up with me going to hospital for a stress test. Fail the stress test miserably at the age of 27.
What do they do? Do they show you like pictures of what's a stress test?
I want a treadmill, and I'm wired up to the nines.
Yeah.
And they're making me run, and the nurse stops me. So it's supposed to be like a 20, I think, from memory, like a 20, 25-minute test. She taps me on the shoulder like 8 minutes and goes, man, your blood pressure is way too high. We've got to stop this test right now. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, and part of it is I was also doing powerlifting. So I'm used to lifting heavy weights.
Yeah.
So blood pressure is going to be very high when you're lifting weights. It's been recorded at sort of 300 over like 100 or 300 over 150. So it's very high when you do heavy powerlifting. Anyway, so then they give me full blood work. And then I find out I've got hypercholesterolemia, which is high cholesterol. And then
what's it called? Hypercholesteremia?
Hypocholesterolemia. Okay. And it's genetically high cholesterol. So I see the cardiologist.
Is that a bad thing or not?
Well, this is to the point of my story.
Yeah.
So I see one of Perth's top cardiologists, and he goes, you need to take statins. Your cholesterol is 7.4. So I've got all my blood work for the last 10 years. Cholesterol is 7.4. You need to go on statins.
Which is
a drug that lowers cholesterol, all right, and very effective to some degree. And I'm like, I don't want to take drugs at 27 because I don't want to be on drugs the rest of my life. So then I go I read the China study, I do all this independent research on nutrition, and I just go vegan. So I just go vegan. I cut out all animal products for 6 months. I see him 6 months later. My cholesterol is now 4. And he's like, what did you do? I'm like, well, I've just cut out all animal products and just gone vegan. He's like, well, what are you doing? Keep doing it. But all I'm eating is plants. So all I'm eating is plants. That's it. I'm not eating anything else. I'm not eating any meat, no eggs, no chicken, none of that. So I'm like, well, this works, right? Yeah. So I go, well, this is pretty powerful stuff. And then I go, well, and then I start to read Dr. Tim Noakes' work, which is if you want to read this book, it's called Real Food on Trial. It's amazing. It's Tim Noakes gets done for putting out some tweets about nutrition, and he was someone who said high carbs for athletes, and then said that for like 15 years, written a book about it. And then tore his book up, said the whole thing was wrong. You need to go down to high fat, low carb to perform well.
I love that someone can admit when they're wrong.
He
or
tore
wanna
his
change
book
their
up,
opinion.
tore the chapter out of his book on camera and said, this is an absolute load of crap, and threw it out and just says, I'm so wrong, I'm so sorry. And this is a well-respected scientist. Anyway, so I then realized that after through more reading, cholesterol in itself isn't bad. You need it. It's positive. It creates your sex hormones. It's in every cell in your body. It makes up the phospholipid layers in your skin, in your membranes, and in your organs. And then I'm like, well, so then I'm now at this point I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm strong. So now I start to put animal products back in. So I start to eat eggs, but I haven't. So up until a couple of weeks ago, I haven't bought a piece of red steak since I was 27, and I'm now 35.
Fuck, it's a bit more expensive now.
Yeah, it's expensive to eat healthy.
Fucking
I think
oath.
everyone knows that.
Yeah.
So yeah, then I go through this whole so then I start to put in just eggs and so forth, and then my cholesterol has slowly gone back up to like 6. But the highest risk of death for me is now till about 45, based on my condition. So, but the only outlier I have is high cholesterol in terms of everything else. I'm in the top 5% of the world in terms of like, that sounds very arrogant. But if you're lifting weights 3 times a week, and you're exercising cardiovascular wise 3 times a week, and you're eating relatively healthy, you're in the top 5% of the world.
Of just
Everyone.
no chances of dying?
You're
or
in terms of like what
health?
in terms of health, in terms of like 75% of Australians are now overweight.
Yeah.
Of those people aren't, of the 25% who are left, some are exercising. I think everyone's trying. Everyone's trying to be healthy. No one wants to be unhealthy. So yeah, and then I go through this sort of like transition to then not eating red meat only and just eating chicken breasts and eggs and I went full keto.
Yeah.
So then I get into triathlon, and now I did the triathlon, and now I'm like, well, there's a period of time where I was measuring my blood every morning for about a year and a half, and I'm just doing full keto, and I lost a lot of weight. And talking to your point about losing weight, so anyone who loses weight quickly when they go carnivore, it's just because you're dumping lots of carbohydrates out of your system, and carbohydrates hold a lot of water. So if you go from eating carbs to not eating carbs, you'll dump like lots of weight real quick.
Yeah.
Sodium, you talked about getting cramps.
Yeah, so I'd started getting cramps within my calves for no reason. Not like after a run, not after a heavy weight session or anything. Just wake up in the morning cramping
From meat?
I'd probably removed too many carbs. I wasn't having fruit.
Sodium.
I just wasn't conscious of what I was eating, and I was like, I'm having my chicken, I'm having some broccoli, I'm having some steak, I'm having some whatever, because I'd put the meat back into my system, and I just sort of lost focus. And then
Yeah,
I
I
was
think
like,
it's like
fuck,
you
I have
change
not been
what-
eating fruit,
Yeah,
which is a good source of carbohydrates.
Yeah, and you've changed a couple of variables at one time, which is
Yes.
always hard. So you've just probably reduced your carbohydrates. You've now dumped off a lot of water in the cell, and you've probably lost a lot of sodium from other foods you're probably eating as well. So sodium, magnesium, those things are associated with cramps. Muscle energy, so obviously muscle glycogen, storage energy in your muscle and liver. You only store carbohydrates in the muscle and the liver. So you've obviously probably depleted those as well. And then obviously a tired, stressed muscle, dehydrated, lack of salts usually causes the cramp. So that's what we sort of know. There are obviously autoimmune diseases cause as well, but that's another conversation. But
So you went to meat and you're dumping you lost a lot of weight?
Yeah. So and so then I go keto, and then all I'm eating is basically fats. And then what I did notice was that day to day, I felt amazing in terms of like my energy levels was, and everyone says this, energy levels are sustained all day. Like you just sustain energy. Like before, I was like in my early 20s, I was just eating refined. I was eating sandwiches and Wheat Bix, and that's the
I
stuff.
used to drink a litre of custard in my teens.
We all did
honestly,
something, mate.
bro. Like 2 times a week, litre of custard, 2 litres of choc milk.
Yeah,
just
mate.
smashing it.
But we all did it. Like that's how we grew up. Like
Yeah.
I used to have 14 Wheat Bix a morning. My mum would kill me.
How many do you do?
Exactly. I couldn't think anything worse now. Like 14 Wheat Bix a morning. Jesus. So yeah, I think over that time, I think the context is important from like an evolution standpoint. Like you've got to try things, you've got to put things into practice.
Yeah.
Do they work for you? Do they not work for you? Can you sustain it? Do you believe in it? If you believe it, it's probably going to be beneficial for you too.
Yeah.
So if you genuinely believe that going carnivore is going to be better, it's going to be better. But
Power
the
of the
more of the point is that you're reducing a lot of refined crap.
Yeah.
That's the main point to all
That
these
seems to
diets.
be the common factor amongst every person we've got on to speak any sort of diet, anyone that I speak to.
Yeah.
It's always been eliminate the shit and you're going to see some
it's
pretty
in a-
fucking good benefits.
If it's in a packet, just
Yeah, well,
it's
like,
crap
and
it.
your point to seed oil. So, like, with this obesity epidemic has just sort of like skyrocketed since like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And we're now. I sort of said the other day that by 2035, more than half the world's going to be overweight, like significantly overweight, not just overweight, like bad.
I bet you they won't be in China or India.
Yeah, well, there won't be.
Like-
Yeah,
It's fucking
Demographics
I saw a real
geographical
funny
location.
little video clip of someone said, "Do you know why an Indian's talking to his mum and goes, I want to move to America." He goes, "Why?" He goes, "Because even the poor people are fat."
And it's bang on. It's
Yeah.
like geographical location can dictate that in the Western world. But a lot of the things that so in terms of sugar, like it's in 80% of the products in our shopping, in our grocery stores, right? And then seed oils are like one of those things where like, I'm not an expert on seed oils, but they're in a lot of things and they are not good, which is the general consensus of everything I've read and seen and done. You've got polyunsaturated fatty acids, you've got saturated fatty acids. There's all these types of fatty acids. We know that good sources of fats from animal products and avocados and those sorts of things, they're all generally good sources of fats.
And is saturated fat good or unsaturated?
Well, the research coming out now is that saturated fat isn't as bad as what they thought it was. It just depends on sort of if you're getting it from refined foods, then that's usually because it's processed seed oils, canola oils, peanut oil. All those oils, they're not healthy and they're in everything that's processed. So if you take all those out and you're going carnivore, keto, you're getting rid of all that. Yeah, but you can still be an unhealthy. You can still be an unhealthy vegan, like vegan cookie. Like you can still eat sugar as vegan. So
yeah.
I guess the biggest impact I've seen in changing something in regards to seed oils was I stopped drinking almond milk.
Yeah.
Fuck, man.
Have
it
a
just
look-
melted off my guts.
Have a look at what's in like soy milks, almond milks, like what baristas use for your coffees. Coffees from a coffee place taste amazing, but then you grab the packaging and look what's in it. It's just packed full of crap and packed
Seed
full of
oils.
sugar, seed oils.
Can
sugar.
we break down for the listeners two things? First one, when you're saying seed oils, this is just oil that we use to cook or process things with that come from some form of plant seed. Is that right?
Yeah, so like think of like canola oils, things like that. They've all been heavily processed. They've been squashed. There's very minimal oil in those sorts of things.
So canola oil is from a canola seed that's been squashed
Yeah,
and got
and then washed and refined, and then obviously put into something, right?
Yeah,
to
remember
increase its shelf life.
Chris Dorman, your mentor, he came on and he said, like, imagine the process you need to put a nut through to get milk out of it. Like, there's a lot of...
It takes 2 minutes in my room.
How good.
Fucking idiot.
Why is this in fashion at the moment? Who's identified all this seed oil?
Because it's coming out more in research. Like they're finding that everyone's trying to piece together why we're getting fatter. Everyone's trying to piece together why we're consistently getting fatter and fatter with all the knowledge that we have today in the Western world. Why we continue to do this. So everyone's obviously just dumping money into this and trying to figure it out. But there's a lot of articles now showing that when you eat those refined foods, it's hard to isolate. One thing's very hard, right?
Yeah.
So and then we can't do good evidence in nutrition studies because we're not allowed to do it anymore because you can't put someone in a room and tell them to eat something a certain way for 6 months. Which is probably,
if you're in China, you can.
yeah, well, it depends where you live.
Actually, I think the government just did that to us for 2 years. Just put us in a fucking room.
Yeah,
Told us when we could.
that would have been a really good opportunity though to do some serious
100%.
nutrition studies. Like we're gonna have like Perth do this, Melbourne do this, Darwin you're doing that.
Who
You're
says
locked in
they
your
weren't?
hotel room?
They could have been doing that.
They could have been doing that. Who knows?
Do you know there was a climate change study that happened through that as well by accident? So the carbon emissions did not change.
Not at all. It kept increasing.
Yeah, so it showed that the actual carbon emissions were not affected by the lack of what we were
Production.
contributing.
None of us here are smart enough to talk about climate change.
No, exactly.
So
But
let's just say
Excuse
that.
me, I'm a straight white male.
I can say what I want on the
I
podcast.
demand a platform. But that is quite strange. But like, I get
We'll say that. We'll try to get a climate scientist on. That'd be pretty
that'd be
cool.
great.
If you get a climate scientist, I'll be very intrigued to listen to that because like they're saying like because the Earth, we shouldn't even talk about it because I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, go. You can say it because you're saying what they're saying.
Yeah, like, but obviously when like the ice sheets melt, they're holding a lot of carbon.
Yeah.
And then as they melting, they're releasing it. As the trees are being chopped down, they're storing it. And then obviously now they're no longer there.
Yeah.
We can't trap it. The oceans are now like the Great Barrier Reef is dying. It's going to be gone in 2035 apparently.
But is it carbon? Because don't we need carbon dioxide?
Yeah, we do.
We do.
Yeah.
But
And we
there's-
need a lot of it.
But
Anyway,
the pressure differential is putting more into the
We're
ocean.
not-
but
Oh, that's a good
should-
point.
We shouldn't talk about
We definitely
climate
shouldn't
change.
talk about it.
Three idiots
fusion?
talking about climate change.
but yeah, sorry. So seed oils, and is in the oils, is that your polyunsaturated and saturated fats, or is it a different kind of fat?
No,
or is
there's certain types of ones. Like I'll be remiss to say here and say that I know them all.
Yeah.
But polyunsaturated fatty acids associated with that, and then saturated fatty acids as well.
Yeah.
In terms of like the chemical bonds and like all those sorts of things, that's someone.
I think I remember from year 12 chem, saturated just means everything has a potential a hydrogen on the end of it, and unsaturated ones are where the bond can break and join with something else.
Yeah, I'm backing you in there. But it's been a while since I've done chem. So part of my nutrition qualification was to do biochem. And it's very in depth, obviously. Yeah. And that's the one thing. Like you go through a nutrition diploma or degree, whatever you want to call it, and there's a lot of conflicting evidence. Like we know that if you eat low carb, you get better at oxidizing fat as a fuel. But then there's been no evidence to suggest that in performance it helps. Which you're thinking like a long distance triathlon where you're going for 10 hours. That if you're better at burning fat and you're better at if you're better at burning fat and you're not using carbohydrates as much in a triathlon, for example, that by the end of the race, you should have more carbohydrate left to perform well if you're oxidizing more fat as a percentage.
That's logical.
Like that's a logical theory. I'm like, that makes sense to me. But then they've got no evidence to suggest that actually does improve performance.
Yeah. So how does your body know which to draw from first? Is that because of your diet?
The intensity.
Training?
Well, there's the intensity of the exercise, and then obviously what you're putting in. So if you put in, like if you want to go for a zone, I think I talked about this last time. If you want to go for a zone 2 run and you have like a bowl of oats beforehand, you're now going to preference oxidizing carbohydrates as a fuel source rather than burning fat.
Just because it's in your gut?
Just because you've now released insulin.
Yeah.
Which obviously upregulates the glycolysis, and obviously going to use a lot more sugar to then perform that low intensity activity.
Right.
So does it create a better performance though by using those carbs? Or?
Well, not if the goal was to go zone 2 and then oxidize fat. It depends on context. If the goal is to go through a zone 2 run and oxidize more fat than carb, then having the carbohydrates prior is probably not the best thing. But if you want to go have, like I did a 10K threshold run on the weekend where I had a big bowl of oats prior because I needed to use carbohydrates for a fuel source. Anything under an hour, you can probably get away with not having carbohydrates. But yeah, it's context.
It fucking fascinates me because like, isn't your body just going to do what it does for this right situation? Like, or do you train it to do something different?
No, you can train it to do something different. It's environmental. You need to understand that when you are putting yourself in a situation to get stronger, fitter, eat different, you are changing somewhat of the process. Like I think ultimately, like if you go without food for 3 days, your body's going to make glucose from fat. So you go through ketones. You need sugar for your brain to work. So if you don't have to eat a carbohydrate ever again.
But and Americans have heaps of sugar and their brains don't work.
This sounds bad. When listening to Americans talk on podcasts, I just think you're like the worst in education in Western society. They're ranked like 25th out of 30 in the westernized countries.
Yeah.
They have this polarizing view.
Are we a bit lower than them though?
Nah, I'm not sure if we're lower or if we're better or we might be on par.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely polarizing and it depends on who you talk to and who you listen to. Obviously, we tend to sort of conform biases to who we listen to.
Well, that's what I do like. Do you know what I like about you, Corey? Is you're able to change your opinion. You're able to grow and change. And that's actually probably the one thing that stood out to me that you said when commenting on the Anthony Chafee episode. You did suggest that, and we don't know if he's done any further research, but he did say he come up with this conclusion 23 years ago and he's stuck with this since.
One thing that sort of throws me off is when someone hears something at the age of 20 and then doesn't change your opinion for 23 years on it. Now, I don't know if that's like a podcast, you're going to get any snippets. Like this guy sat down and spoke for 3 hours.
Yes.
If you spoke to him for 20 hours, you'd probably get a lot more of the picture. But if I hear like in science class that, this is like fruits are killing you, I don't eat them, and I don't change my opinion for 23 years and continue to do that. To me, I feel like you need to change your opinion in the face of good, solid science. Yeah. Now, the hard thing is, like, to his argument, or anyone else, like, it's very hard to find good evidence in nutrition studies. Yeah. That's why it's very polarizing. You can sort of say what you want and get away with it. And
do you think that's by design? Do you think that's because we look at and we can talk about the food plate, the food pyramid, and the changes in that, because that was obviously pretty insane what we've seen recently.
Yes,
is going on there. Actually, to talk about that, because it's not a black and white like this is better than that.
No, so they've got criteria of what they deem to be healthier food. So if you do the research and read the articles, they talk about they have 9 criteria of how they rank their food. And I think the biggest thing that came out of that article was the article that was released that said cereal was better than
like
ground beef.
Lucky Charms or something like that. Yeah.
So they take into effect, so it's just an algorithm. They've designed an algorithm.
Have you ever eaten American cereal?
It's
Fucking
so good.
Yeah, it's just sugar.
It's
the sweetest. How is
so
a bowl of Captain Crunch or Lucky Charms better than ground beef?
Mate, the fact we even sell cereal surprises me. The fact we still get away with selling cereal. But the reason why is because they have all these algorithms they build into their systems, because obviously I think they analyze like 8,000 foods, and if it's fortified with minerals and fiber and fortified with magnesium and all these other types of things that we need, folate, vitamin B12. So if you're a vegan, you don't get much vitamin B12. So a lot of cereals are fortified with that. So they have all these ways to measure it.
When you say fortified, what they've just added
They've
in?
added it in.
Yeah.
So they've added in, like, because a lot of people aren't getting enough, they're not eating enough healthy foods.
Yeah.
They've got to fortify the crap food with stuff in there.
Yeah.
So which is why these things get higher ratings. And then it goes on like the percentage of sugar. Like if it's, so you know when you read a packet and it might say 20 grams of carbohydrates and it might have 1 gram of sugar. That is a healthier source of carbohydrate because it's a low glycemic index. It's not going to give you a massive spike in blood sugar.
Yeah.
You'll definitely have a glucose response. But if you see 20 grams of, like in chocolate, you see 20 grams of carbs, it's 20 grams or 19.8 grams of sugar. You're getting an insulin sugar response to that. So they, like when the study had whole grains versus refined grains, it got a better mark. Wow. So just that's where it all came from. And
refined got better mark?
No, the whole grains.
Okay.
The whole grains, how they're obviously produced versus a heavily refined grain going through the process of being stripped of its nutrients, washed, coloured, whatever.
There's a cool experiment you can do that I used to do with my year 7 and 8 to prove Corey's point about them adding stuff in. I think it was with either Special K or some of your cereals. You crush it up and you get a magnet and you can literally take out the magnesium particles that will be magnetized.
There you go.
Because magnesium, potassium, that's actually just metals in your body.
Metals, yeah,
and calcium. It's nuts.
Incredible,
You can actually, that tripped me out.
But is that necessarily a bad thing, like the magnesium?
I think that's good that it's in there.
But
it's like, I didn't realize that. Well, like, I think they just talk shit as a marketing thing, and to actually crush it up and show the kids, was awesome.
Yeah, but Kellogg's don't have an interest in your health. Neither do they don't care about your health.
What do you mean?
So Kellogg, from memory, I'm probably going to butcher this. Do you know much about Dr. Kellogg?
No.
It was made to...
yes.
Fuck.
Cornflakes was made to stop sex or abstinence. It was like a Christian
to lower testosterone.
There you go.
So they get fed it, and then he just turned it into the biggest fucking cereal brand in the world.
Yeah, if you eat cereal, you definitely get lower testosterone, that's for sure. It's definitely not something you want to be eating lots of, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, and this is where
But that's obviously, that's how it's been confused. So they're not actually saying really it's healthier. They're saying it's providing the minerals and the things.
It's just providing more than what the ground beef was providing. The ground beef obviously has lots of good stuff in it.
Yeah.
But they just managed to pack more shit in this.
Yeah. But
they can do it artificially.
But on the negative side, it's also giving you fucking 10 times more sugar and fucking all this other bullshit that you shouldn't be having.
You're not eating cereals and being healthy. Put it that
and
way.
if they're looking for just that component and comparing it all on just that component, then of course they can.
Yeah, and the guy came out
results.
afterwards, and obviously he's been doing this his whole life research wise. He's done multiple versions of it, and he said, "Look, of course we got backlash." And he goes, "We're obviously trying to refine it every single year, but it's very hard to create a system that analyzes all foods and gets it all right at one time." So he's like, we know that we need to work on it. This was taken way out of context.
Well, they do have a system that's right at all times.
Yeah,
being vegan.
Yeah,
ask them.
Yeah.
What was your? I wanted to ask you now that prompted me. You went through everything you'd done.
Yeah.
What did you find is ultimately the best for you?
Because we're all biodiversity.
Yeah. I feel like the high fat thing makes the most sense.
Yeah. So let me preface this with, this is another spanner in the works, right? So your genetic makeup can dictate how you store body fat. So if you listen to a neuroscientist, they can tell you that fat and weight gain resides in the brain. Okay, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he talks about that. You talk to a nutritionist, they think it's food. You talk to somebody who talks about exercise, it's exercise. Like I used to say, exercise is way more important. It's so not. If you want to lose weight, nutrition is by far the most important thing. Don't even waste your time trying to exercise to lose weight if your diet's poor. But going back to your point, I think for me personally, this is my journey that I found that being lower carb, I definitely perform way better. I look better. I feel better. I don't get energy slumps. It's when I say low carb, I'm talking about low refined carbs. I'm not eating your cereals, your breads, your pastas on a regular occasion. Now, if I go to a party and like there's something there, like 5 years ago, I left a wedding one time to go get some food. Like, that's how anal I was about it. Nowadays, I'm like, well, you've got to live your life. So, like, I'm not going to sit there and leave a party. I can have something on one sitting. But I know when you start to take these things out of your diet and you put them back in, how it makes you feel. So, more fat, 100% more fat. I think that was, people heard talk about this all the time, that fat it was shamed for so long. And we know how important it is.
That's true fat shaming.
True fat shaming. That is the real crime here. So yeah, we know fat's important. We know if you're eating lots of fat, it's not going to make you sick and unhealthy and unwell, depending on where you're getting it from. If you're getting it from like Doritos, yes, it's going to make you sick. So yeah, for me, lower refined carb, real food. I've eaten sort of eggs and chicken and stuff for the last, all my life really. But when I went to that stage where I cut red meat out, I didn't feel like I had any adverse effects to having no red meat. I was eating, and obviously like things like drinking, and obviously as you get older, you drink less, you tend to care about your health more. You're just more invested in your own health as you get older.
That does seem to be the thing. Like, the older I get, the more I want to take care of my body, because
optimize.
You're getting, it's so much harder. Like, fucking hangovers, you used to bounce up like the next day and go, right, what's fucking next? Now you're fucked. Or if you eat something poor now, like, I can see it straight away.
You know when you have something bad. But like weight gain, like if you go low carb for say just a week, you drop like 3 or 4 kilos straight away from water weight and losing all your muscle glycogen. So you hold 400 to 500 grams of carbs in your system, and every gram holds 3 grams of water. So if you do that, you've just lost 2 kilos just by doing that straight away. Okay. So then you've got to go into like, well, how does it make you feel? Can you perform on this? And then now I'm at a point in my career where I work with athletes at a very high level, professional, semi-professional, and I've got to try and get these athletes to perform optimally, but also be healthy. So, last week with my footy boys, I created like a weekly periodized plan of when they should be having their refined crap and when they should be eating more real foods, low carb foods. But then if you want to perform well, this is one question I wanted to ask Anthony, is that, what is his exercise regime? Because I think if you're doing like for me doing triathlon, or you're still running a marathon, or I'm not sure you're going to get I did a bit of research before coming out here. I can't find any evidence to suggest that doing a carnivore diet is going to improve endurance performance. Like, you probably get away with it in strength training and lifting weights because it's not as physically taxing. Like in an hour of lifting weights, you're going to burn 350 calories, 400 calories of energy.
Will it,
if calories is something you believe in terms of like weight loss,
negate performance?
Maybe. I mean, I can't speak to the evidence on it. I know that. Well, I can. Sorry, I can know that if you're doing an endurance event and you're not fully loaded with carbohydrates and fueling with carbohydrates, performance is worse. Okay. So we know that.
So for performance-wise, it's potentially worse.
Endurance performance.
Yeah, endurance. So we're talking about things lasting longer than an hour, right? So I find that very hard to fathom. Like when I did my nutrition course, I read a lot of conflicting stuff, and I was like, I found it hard to believe what I was reading. So why doesn't it make sense?
What was it, the Bible or something?
How is it? I don't know. How is that even a thing? I don't know. So when you talk about but the science
and the conflicting evidence, everyone's got an agenda.
Yeah, everyone's got an agenda,
and they can change their agenda and identify whatever agenda they want these days.
Yes, I'm not touching that one.
I would avoid that.
If you don't want to touch it,
I would avoid that whole subject completely.
Yeah, I'm not an expert. I should not be talking about that. So,
but yeah, if you've got conflicting evidence and one study says one thing and one says the other, like, what do you trust? It's like Channel 7 or CNN versus Fox.
Yeah. So you've got to go with what works for you. You've got to go with what can you sustain. All those sort of cliche answers, just you can rattle them off here as much as you like.
Yeah.
But what I've found is that the people I've worked with, even just like your thought process. So I had a client, so I don't work with clients one-on-one anymore. I just run the business. However, I work with the type of athletes, and every now and then I get a case where it excites me because it challenges. Getting someone fit and healthy is easy if they just listen to me. Like, if you just do what I say, you'll go okay.
And where do you work?
So getting someone
Tex has done pretty well.
Yeah.
Oh mate, well the transformation in Tex, and just his
everything looks younger,
mentally,
healthier.
So getting the average, the everyday person to get fit and healthy is not a challenge for me in terms of like, if you just do this, it'll happen. But the hardest thing with that is getting them to buy into it, and how do you phrase it in a way that they're involved and they go, okay, I get it now. So an example is I had a lady come to me. Her chiro emailed me saying, mate, she's seen every doctor, every PT. She's 50 years old. She can't lose weight. She's adamant that she's doing the right thing. And I'm like, all right, I'll see her. So we've seen her for an hour and a half, and I'm just listening to her talk about her journey. Like, she's got all these things going on. Like, she's lost lots of family members. She hurt herself riding a horse. So there was this compounding things over years where she just constantly battered with emotional stress. But as she's talking, everything she's saying to me is that I can't. This doesn't work. I can't. Her internal dialogue was so thrown off by her experiences that she'd basically talked herself into not getting better.
Yeah.
And I don't normally do this, and you've got to pick your person.
Yeah.
But I said, it's all your fault. Like, it's your internal dialogue is, I don't want to get better. I don't want to admit that I'm where I'm at, and you need to find a way to reframe your mindset and start to build better habits.
Self-accountability.
Yeah, and it's also like, trying something for 3 weeks is not going to make you better, like to the point where your life has now changed. It takes
Delby
consistency, right? So when I had this conversation with this lady, and she's in tears now. Like, she's like, "Fuck, you're right." Like, and I just said, and I just used examples of her conversation with me back to her. I said, "This is the mirror. This is what you said to me. I did this. I can't do this, and I can't do that. I've tried that. I can't do this." I said, "Look, it's gonna take a few months, but this is what I want you to do." Anyway, so she comes in. I see her yesterday actually, and she goes, "I can't thank you enough." Like,
you can thank her enough.
She's like, I've dropped 7 kilos. Because her biggest thing was she couldn't get around day to day without being out of breath. I'm like, you're just unfit. Like, you're just at a point where you're eating crap food all the time. You're not exercising. You're just super unfit.
Yeah.
And she's like, it can't be that, Croy. Like, I'm walking. I'm like, walking's the minimum anyone should do. just, and it's not. I'm not laughing at her. It's just like, people believe that, okay, I walk in the morning, so that I should therefore be fit enough to do certain things. I'm like, So then she comes in yesterday and she's like, I've lost 7. I'm feeling amazing. Like, I'm not. Yeah, I still struggle with things. I've still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing I sit down with people is go, well, this is going to take years. You've been in a situation like this for, say, 5, 10, 15 years. It's going to take a long time to climb out of this hole.
Yeah.
And she's not sleeping well, and sleep's a massive thing. And I was like, if you sleep better, you're going to lose weight. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, just try and prioritize sleep, and you're gonna lose weight. Yeah. And now she's obviously eating a lower refined carbohydrate. She's still having carbohydrates, but lower refined, and just eating normal foods. And then now I've just said, you need to surround your environment. Get an environment where people are like-minded. Get out, and her whole family was the same. Yeah. And now the whole family's changed. Now all the family are like exercising and losing weight and getting results, which is great. But now I've just got her to do a park run once a week. Yeah. Go to your park run. Everyone there is trying to do the same thing. I don't care if you walk it. Just walk the 5Ks and get a time. Yeah. And now her times are coming down, and she's better each week. And it's just amazing. But she couldn't see her internal dialogue was just thrown off.
You're almost sports psychologist as well now, because self-talk. Well, the mental side of things. Yeah, I can fucking resonate with that, man. Like, my self-talk before I got my back was, it's fucked. It's never going to get fixed. And that was from every experience I had. No matter what I was doing, it fucked it. But when I found somebody that presented me with scientific evidence, all the studies, it was up to date. He's like, give this a go. This will happen. It's going to hurt, but that's normal. Yeah. You know, whereas everyone else was like, do this, and it would fucking kill. And I'd be like, well,
But don't you think
it reaffirms your belief? It just reaffirms, it just solidifies. So I'm the same as you. So I'm limping every day for 7 years with my ankle because I've got a severely damaged ankle and I've got arthritis. And I'm like, this is who I am. This is it. Yeah. I'm going to be Corey Green walking around limping every day for the rest of my life from the age of 20 like this. And then I get to 27, and after this whole stress incident, and I start to really analyze what I'm actually doing with my life, my food, I go, well, hang on a minute, I'm actually eating a lot of crap. So when I eat like shit carbs now, I wake up the next morning, I haven't done anything, I'm limping. I'm like, there's genuine stuff going on here with inflammation. Like, this is genuinely happening to my body. I'm getting inflammation caused by the foods I'm eating. And when you drink, you get inflammation. So when you drink the next day, I'll wake up, I'm limping, bad.
It's probably the most empowering thing, taking self-accountability for everything, even when it's not your fault. Yeah. It's like you take complete control. And that's not just with health and diet and physical fitness. That's with anything. That's with like quitting your jobs and like where you are at in life and relationships or whatever. If you take complete accountability, you have complete control. And it just gives you this empowering feeling of like, oh yeah, well, it's not out of my hands. I'm not out of control. I can actually make the change and make the difference.
It's massively damaging to ego as well, because for you to actually admit, well, nah, my diet's shit.
It is me.
You know, it is me. Then you got to fucking drop your ego and go, right, you're doing the wrong thing. And that's the same thing with changing your opinion about nutrition. You've got to kill your ego because you're an expert. And if you just fucking dig yourself in the trenches and you believe that same thing, it's all ego death.
And you might be right for a majority of things you're talking about. And I think most people, everyone is trying to do the right thing and everyone's trying to get people healthier. And I get that. But ego is massive. And if Ego is the Enemy is a great book by Ryan Holiday. And one of my boys who plays the West Coast, he exerts ego.
Yeah.
And I've given him this book. And I said, if the book title offends you, you need to fucking read it. And he looked at me and laughed. He goes, all right, no worries. Anyway, he texted me the next day, that night, going, incredible. I can't believe, thank you. Like,
You finished the book in one night.
I'm like, what do you mean you finished the book in a day? He's like, I couldn't put it down. Like, just read the book in a day. I'm like,
what was it called?
Ego is the Enemy. Ego is the Enemy. So,
I'm
really,
gonna
so
get
when
that
it
one.
comes to this, like, as you get more successful in your life and in your career, it's hard not to get a bit of an ego.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need a bit of a reality check, and sometimes you need to go, well, this situation, I need to sort of go, all right, put my hand up and go, this wasn't the right information to give to someone. And I think everyone can sit here, no one can sit here and go, I provide information to everyone and it's been right all the time. Like, that's not how it works. It's going, look, this didn't work. I told people to eat high carbs for a long time, like, because that's what I got taught. And by the way, a balanced diet, which we're told to eat, according to the government, is 45 to 65% carbohydrates. That is not balanced. Balance is 30-30-30 or 33-33 across all. That's balanced diet. That's not. That's outweighing that sort of side of things. And how we've been sort of fed the information is very different as well compared to like the funding and the research and like that. He talked about the Coca-Cola funding more research than the NIH.
Yeah.
Nuts.
How is that possible?
Yeah.
How was that even allowed, by the way?
That's nuts.
I think it's the one thing we're trying to do a lot of is trying to be open-minded to have our minds changed. We even came up with an idea of trying to prove ourselves wrong with our opinions on the COVID jab mandates, for example. Like, if we can prove ourselves wrong, well, then obviously we can then go, well, fuck, we're pushing the wrong message. We can change it, or we're going to prove ourselves right and be vindicated either way. And same with, I think it's next Friday, I think we've got a body positivity advocate coming on
Wednesday, Heidi Anderson.
And that's going to be a really good conversation because she potentially could move our minds in certain ways on certain areas of our opinions in that area. So I like to think me and Delby are trying to do our best to be open-minded to have our minds changed. It's hard because, fuck, if we were wrong on some of the things we've been pushing for the last 2 years, it'd be a fucking big pill to swallow. But I think to be a better person and a better podcast, and so we do need to be able to be open to changing.
You never
our minds.
hear those stories, right? You never hear the ones who have done a carnivore diet and just crashed and burned, and a lot of times, depending on you, like I'm like you extremist in like a lot of things I do. So I'll do it to the nth degree, but I'm obviously learning to find the grey area. So if you take it to the extreme and you've gone from eating this way and you change 6 variables and now like you're not eating carbs, you're not eating fruit, you're not eating vegetables, and you're just eating meat. There's going to be as you said, there's going to be a significant portion there, 2 or 3 weeks where you're going to be struggling big time.
Yeah.
And from what I've read and research and so forth, they find that when you go to like a higher fat diet and you get off and you wean yourself off carbohydrates, there's definitely a 2 or 3 window. So I've worked with people, and one of my good mates I've done this with him. I've explained to him, if you explain from the start, mate, you're going to have poor energy levels for the first few weeks because he's just a trader, he's just eating carbs all day.
Yeah.
And then when he goes to transition to high fat, he finally gets to the point where the penny drops, it clicks. I understand what this is making me feel like. But once again, he did that for a while, and he's introduced carbohydrates back into his diet because he's training a lot as well. So and that's one thing I wanted to ask him, was, what's his training schedule now on one piece of steak a day? Is he performing? Because we know from cardiovascular research that high intensity, you need carbohydrates to perform. So if you're doing high intensity above 80% of max heart rate, you need carbohydrates to perform well, and you can't break down
perform in regards to like in
I'm talking about
performance.
I'm talking athletic performance, or someone going to like doing like a 10K run or a hard effort at the gym for like from a cardio perspective. We know that you need sort of carbohydrates to perform well, because you can't break down fat fast enough and convert it to glucose in order to perform well enough.
Because Squirrely our producer sometimes comes on the podcast a bit. He, after that podcast, dived into the carnivore diet, and he said he didn't notice an increased level of like this feeling of, you know, more energy.
Yeah.
What he noticed was this level of no dip.
Yeah, just consistent energy levels.
Yeah. So what's the cause of that?
Well, I mean, once again, context is king here, so it depends on what he was eating first. But if he's taken away a lot of his refined carbohydrates, like when you eat those foods, you just get this constant level of blood sugar levels going this all throughout the day. And I experienced this in my early 20s where you have breakfast, you feel okay for an hour, then you get tired at 10 o'clock, and then you have a snack, and you feel good, then you get tired. Okay. Have lunch, and then you get tired. So what you're doing is obviously just trying to control. So people use like a lot of CGMs now, like constant glucose monitors, where they're actually tracking, they're putting it in the back of their arm, or they're sticking it on themselves, and then it's literally watching their blood sugar levels throughout the day, depending on what they eat.
Is there any benefit to increase in blood sugar levels, or is that just for fight or flight responses?
Exercise-wise, you need it.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to perform, you need sugar up, depending on what you're doing. Fight or flight, I think is definitely part of it. Obviously, the adrenal glands.
But if you're eating and then sitting down doing fuck all,
well, that's why we're all sick and fat, is because we're not doing that. We're not getting to our primal instincts in terms of like, fight or flight. We're not getting in a situation where someone's trying to choke us out and we've got to try and survive. We're not getting that sort of response, and this is why.
Do you think that's why it's important that we do put ourselves in these sorts of hard situations to
stress,
improve?
Stress the system to adapt and feel better.
Yeah.
But this is why if someone takes steroids, for example, they can eat pretty much whatever they want, and no matter what they eat, they're going to look good and they're going to look big and shredded. Okay, and this is why you obviously know the Liver King.
Yeah.
Mate, when that guy got exposed, when someone sent me his thing, goes, look at this guy's ancestral eating, like this has to be the way of the future. I'm like, the dude is taking serious amounts of steroids. He can do whatever he wants. Like he looks, how can you not tell he's on steroids, right? And then he makes a video where he's like himself as a doctor throwing a clipboard on the table saying the blood results are in, it's all ancestral. Like there's nothing wrong with me. All my blood work's clean. I'm like, dude, you're a fraud.
Yeah.
So people who are taking anything, I've worked with one person in my 15 years who's taken steroids, and I'm telling you right now, they weren't eating healthy whatsoever, and they had a very active social life, and gets leaner, put on 8 kilos in 12 weeks
of muscle,
of lean tissue. Not much of it was. There would have been a bit of fat there. It might have been 15 weeks, but we're talking about you can consume pretty much whatever you need when you're taking exogenous testosterone.
Why is that? Is that because it processes it quicker?
Hormones. Hormones, going back to calories in versus calories out. This is where I think hormones are a massive part of weight loss and weight gain.
Yeah.
Okay. So when testosterone's up, you're leaner. We know that from research. When testosterone's low, you generally hold more body fat. Women obviously have more estrogen than we do.
Depends on the woman in 2023.
It does. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's like when kids go through a growth spurt. You know those kids who are like real short, fat, and pudgy?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they get like this growth spurt of testosterone, right? That's when you're the most hormonal in your life, okay? And we can all attest to that. They just grow. They're not changing their diet. They're not eating less calories. They're not monitoring what they're eating. They're just getting this influx of hormones, and they get this nice big growth spurt. They get leaner, and they get taller, and they get stronger. So there's something to that, and it's very hard to pinpoint and find it in research and go, well, this is why.
Yeah, but it makes sense.
Makes sense from it's one theory, and it makes sense. So
yeah, and there are ways to naturally improve your testosterone, like that sauna and stuff like that.
Lifting weights is the main one.
Yeah. But that it obviously doesn't take away from the fact that Liver King is obviously a fraud, but organ meat's still very beneficial to eat and
high in lots of vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin B's, all those sorts of things that you don't get from certain other foods. But still good things to eat. But who's eating? How many people are going to eat organs? Like most people aren't going to go out and eat an organ.
Yeah,
in the general population, how many people are going to do that?
Yeah,
give me a number.
Well, even like if you are
10%?
doing if you want liver for what is it, lamb's? Is it lamb's fry?
Lamb liver or chicken liver? You
like
can get that. You can't get.
But
much
you can't
else.
you can't have the potato. You can't have the sauce with it. So you couldn't have it in a tasty way. So
salt.
Salt.
And I think that's an extreme. It's extreme outlook on life, and it's not going to get across to a lot of people. I think a lot of people will try it, and I think a lot of people will take some good things away from it. Like keto, has got its bad points. Low carb has its bad points. They've all got something with them that you're like, well, that doesn't really make sense. And but most people aren't going to cut out caffeine and alcohol.
So just a good balance, hey? Just a good balance of good, clean food.
I don't think it's a balance. I think it's more like on the side of
eliminating shit.
Yeah, like it's. We say balance in the fact that when I say
sorry.
balance, I'm not talking about 30% carbs, 30% fat. as long as you're getting 20% fat as a minimum, you need that to survive and thrive. But yeah, in the majority of the rest of it should be fat, and then you can have a small portion of obviously carbohydrates. But protein and fats are your main ones. And if research shows that when you get like an isocaloric diet, so you get, say they eat 2,000 calories a day, half eat high carb and low fat, and the other one eats high fat, low carb. According to research, they both get the same result. So they both lose weight or they maintain weight or whatever. But then I would argue that everyone knows if you eat carbohydrates, you are hungrier. So it generally drives. So and the studies aren't long
Doesn't
enough.
satiate
you enough. So that's what good things about like meat are, like high fat cut meats and chicken thighs, and they're good because you can't eat lots of that, and it's very satiating. But whereas you eat like breads, and I can eat a whole loaf of bread in one sitting, no worries, like easy. Just I can put down a whole loaf of bread. I used to do that as a kid. Yeah. I think most people can, but you can eat donuts all day, you can eat sugar all day, you can eat sugar and fat all day.
I can eat like sausages and meat all day. I can smash that.
It's very hard to eat a good cut of meat and feel like you can overindulge in it and actually want to have more and more.
That's what I guess he did say, that eat to your gut, I guess. Eat to your hunger is fulfilled. That was it. But one thing, because I keep on wanting to wrap it up, but there's
I got two.
Yeah, I got one thing. So we were talking about the vegetables and stuff like that, and how he did suggest, and like I said, I think 90% of what he was saying was fucking bang on. He was really good. Yeah. But one thing we didn't query him on, and I did sort of really want to see if you knew anything on, was like these carcinogens that he was talking about. Can you cook them out? Does our body digest them? Has it evolved to work with them? Is it because it's fucking laced with pesticides and herbicides and stuff like that? What's the
look,
reasoning?
I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm an expert at it. Like, I'm not going to. There are definitely, from the things you read, there are like more toxins in certain elements of fruit and vegetables and so forth. But in terms of like cooking things and like denaturing stuff, like I read a thing this morning. This is even more depressing. That when you, like a calorie, like let's say one egg has 47 calories, when you cook it, it actually increases in calories. So I'm like, counting calories is also like coming into like, well, can you count calories accurately? Because if you're weighing a piece of steak at 200 grams and putting it into MyFitnessPal, and then you cook it, and it somehow changes the denatures of protein.
Where does the extra calorie come from?
That's what I want to know. Like, I need to go back and find this out.
Because the law of conservation of mass suggests that if you start with the amount of calories, well, it depends, because I don't know the science what turns into a calorie. So if
we don't have calorie receptors, by the way. So I'm not. Yeah, in terms of like the body counting it, the body's not counting calories. We're not going, you've got 200 calories in, so we're going to partition 100 calories to your muscle and 20 calories to your brain. Like, it's not doing that. It's just taking what it needs from the food. So, but yeah, it's an interesting point, and I don't know the answer to that question, so I'm definitely going to look into it further. But if we're at the point where we can't count calories, counting calories is it's actually quite easy nowadays, but it's very tedious, and it becomes very like.
I feel it's restricting, and like it would almost make you not enjoy the process of eating food.
Yeah, and that's part of it. So I think it's important that you just going again, eating good, wholesome, real foods that aren't processed, and you're generally going to be okay, and just move and exercise and strength training.
Getting hard to do because of the amount of nutrients in the land these days.
Yeah, and then
the same amount of
that as well.
Tomato compared to 30 years ago.
And by the way, if you read the climate change book, we're all fucked anyway, so don't worry about it. So
well, if you believe Greta Thunberg, we were fucked 5 years ago.
Yeah, so if you read that, don't even worry about it. So I just feel sorry for our kids. The next generation is going to be in a world of hurt, apparently.
We're all it's very confusing. All of this science, all of these studies, we've touched on it.
But the thing that you said a little bit earlier in the pod that I want to hash on is you said genetically some of us process stuff differently. That goes in direct opposition of what Dr. Anthony was saying. So do you think that people that go, I'm fat because it's in my genetics?
Some people are more predisposed to gaining weight than others, and we know that through genetic studies. So we know that there is certain components in our DNA that allow us to either one, store energy more, or one, be, we all have that one person we know who just eats whatever they want and they physically will not change. Like we all know that person. So they're obviously on that genetic spectrum and I think the epigenetic study that I read, they were saying that 30 to 35% of weight gain and people's body shape can be explained by genetics. Obviously, the rest of it's going to be nutrition and how you move and those sorts of things.
But it wouldn't be obese, like obese people.
No, we're not talking. No, I'm not saying if you're obese, like you're obese because you're not moving and you're eating poor food choices. But yeah, what the point I'm trying to make is that like me as Corey Green, that I know that I'm more sensitive to carbohydrates than most. Whereas like I go on a trip to Europe, right? And this is a funny story my athletes laugh about, my staff laugh about. I finish Ironman, I'm 80 kilos, fittest I've been. 2 weeks later, I fly to Europe, and all I'm eating is just refined shit. And because I'm just traveling Europe, I'm eating like Belgian waffles and pastas. I mean, I'm in Italy for the last 6 days, having a pizza every day and pasta, and just like, I'm going to enjoy this time.
Why not?
So me and my best mate, we both go together. We both pretty much eat very similar amounts of food. I gained 13 kilos in 5 weeks.
Insane.
And he gains 5 kilos in the same time. And he's 13 kilos. To be fair, to be fair, like obviously I just finished Ironman, so I'm eating well, and so I put on like the first couple of weeks were just eating heaps of carbs, so I just gained like 3 or 4 kilos of water weight. So I probably gained 7 to 8 kilos of genuine fat mass and water retention, and I look sick. We got a photo of me on the plane going, and a photo of me in the plane coming back, and I look sick coming back in 5 weeks. And it's an obviously extreme example of me just. I'm not counting any calories. I'm just binging on crap food.
Yeah, drinking.
And I don't drink here like during the week. I very rarely drink here. But I'm having a beer in every place I'm visiting because I want to experience their culture and what they're doing.
Yeah, and it just relax and enjoy yourself as well, yeah.
Yeah, but I felt sick. Like I generally felt sick when I was coming home. And so for me, genetically, I know that I'm more sensitive to that. Some people don't sit well with high fat diets. They just don't like it, don't handle it, they gain weight. But there's so many moving parts to this. It's almost impossible to go, well, this is the answer. So
it's nuts. I think I asked you this the last pod, but if I think Sam Glasheen told me this theory. Let's say I eat pretty well Monday to Saturday or whatever. Is there a theory where I can just smash as much food and shit on Sunday as I want, and because your stomach can only process so much of it before you shit it out, you might as well, if you eat a kilo of Maccas or 5 kilos of Maccas, it won't matter? Well, some of those guys that eat professionally as well, they do the same thing.
That makes sense in my head logically.
Does that work?
Logically, so every food has a bioavailability. So you can extract a certain amount of nutrients out of certain foods. And I'm trying to think, I think with protein, it's up to like 40 or 50 grams in a serving. So once you get past that, you're now not actually uptaking any protein. So you're going to excrete it out as urea, or you're going to store very small parts in body fat. So I don't know the number in terms of like how many calories you need to consume in one meal, but I know that when you overconsume food, you're not taking in all of the energy that's coming in. Okay. That's
so not far off what.
Yeah, like maybe not far off, but like that's not a scientific answer. But yeah, there is definitely certain, like we know through research that 20 to 30 grams of protein in your meals seems to be optimal. Once you get past sort of 50 grams, the bioavailability, your ability to uptake it is reduced. So we know that. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
So before we finish, I want to go slightly away from nutrition. Well, actually, this is nutrition because you got your nutrition wrong in your last Ironman. You did very well. You got your best time, PB, from memory. But what happened? Because you were you were flying and then you fucked up your nutrition, did you?
Well, it's two things. One, that I rode to Busselton. So I rode from my house in Mullaloo to Busselton 6 weeks out from the race. It's 260 Ks. And then I ran 12 Ks. I got to Busso, got off the bike, and just noticed my knee was sore. I was like, well, that's not ideal, but I could still run. So I ran 12 Ks off the bike, and then I ran 30 the next day on Sunday. So I rode 260, ran 42 over that weekend. But then I couldn't ride the bike again until basically the race week. And my knee was I basically got like a stress response in my bone. That was probably the main part of it. But then on the bike, I had my race suits, which the pockets are terrible, and I lost half my race nutrition. And then I get about 2/3.
And the food fell out.
Food fell out. So the food fell out my back pocket. So now I've lost all my energy. And this is the ironic thing with Ironman is you're just consuming refined crap the entire day. And you feel like crap afterwards, obviously for multiple reasons. But anyway, so I lose half my nutrition out my pocket. And then I realize about 120 Ks into the bike with 60 Ks to go that I lose my straw out of my water bottle with all my carbohydrate fuel in there. So then I'm like, I can't even drink that. So then I get to the... So then
I thought about putting your lips on the cup.
It's like jammed in and you can't really pull it out and drink. So I'm only taking some, but I'm still taking carbs from the aid stations, but it's just not enough. And then anyway, I get off the bike and I'm feeling okay. it's a windy day, but I run the first 20 Ks at where I wanted to be. And then I just hit this like sudden wall. Like, and I haven't had this before in an Ironman where I hit it that early. And I hit it at 20 Ks and I was like,
Of the run,
yeah. So 20 Ks in this run, it just hit me. I'm like, oh, and I just felt I had all my energy sapped. And I was like, oh, this is going to be, and then the internal dialogue goes this is going to be a long 22 Ks. And then now I'm mentally like just breaking down. Like, I'm like, oh, come on, you got this. And I go through, you ride that roller coaster. But at that point, I just hadn't topped up my nutrition enough. The last Ironman, I ran to 35 Ks with no issues whatsoever. And then obviously struggled the last 7, which is sort of expected. But to hit that wall at 20 my nutrition was just not, because I lost most of it, was a big reason why I ended up bonking. And obviously my preparation going in with the bike was not as ideal as I wanted it to be. So
there's an aid station.
Delby.
You pull over, you pull your pants down, and
That was a race.
Oh my God.
Somalia?
So yeah, anyway, that was so anyway, I didn't actually improve. So my times for all 3 disciplines were exactly the same as my last race a year ago.
Wow.
So I was filthy.
Annoying.
The only thing I improved on was my transitions between swim and bike and bike
Oh
and run.
fuck.
Wow.
So I improved by 2 minutes, and I
Okay.
was 2 hours. Oh, sorry, it was 10 hours and 2 minutes and 50 seconds. I wanted to go sub 10. And I crossed the line, and this is what I hate. This is regret straight away, and I can't believe I did this. I was so filthy at like, I saw a time flash up,
Yeah.
but they have like a live rolling clock, which sometimes they just play the overall time of the day. And I saw 10 hours 10, and I just given it the finger. I was like, I've gone, and it wasn't a finger to Ironman, it was a finger to me going, I can't believe you've done this. You've got 7 minutes worse. How is that possible?
Yeah.
And then I crossed the line and someone goes, oh, you got 10:02. I was like, what? I thought you got 10:10. It's like, no. So I improved, but a whole year had gone by. I didn't improve, so I wasn't too happy
But,
with it.
I mean, you add nutrition and water, and surely you get a couple of extra minutes.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? So we know that through carbohydrates are important in those long endurance events. We know that.
And just no victim mentality. That's what that sounded like. That.
Well, I had at that moment of fatigue, ego got the better of me by giving the sign the finger. I was disappointed at that moment. That was me like on my knees, fatigued, like down and out.
Yeah.
And obviously self-reflection, like it was just all ego. Like it was, and that race was ego driven, and that's why I bombed out, and that's why I failed, and that's why when I read Ryan's book over Christmas, I was like, you're just a dick. Like you just, you didn't need to do that. And it's not good enough from someone who tried to model behavior to others. So
Yeah.
I think you're allowed to express frustration. Though.
you can,
Like,
you can. But, and what was funny though, is I've done 4 Ironmans now, and you get like a video clip of you finishing the race. guess what? This year I didn't get one.
Oh yeah.
They've gone through, I reckon, and gone, nah, we're going to take that out.
Yeah.
could have
And
just said I was saying I'm the one.
so disappointing.
mate.
But anyway,
That's been one of your best performances, I think, mate, on the podcast.
Better than last year's one. Same amount of
You
time.
improved by 2 minutes. I'd be laughing so much when it's
Oh,
been
that
about
would be so
an hour
funny.
50. So I don't imagine if it was an hour 48 or something. That would be so good. But mate, fucking awesome episode. You were on today. You must have had your sleep in. So
Sean, yeah.
yeah, my black coffee, my run, I felt good. But yeah, like some of those things, like there's so much misinformation out there, and I just think people just need to do their own research. But get a professional. Don't just say listen to this podcast and all of a sudden start implementing something straight away.
Hey. We are a valid fucking source of information.
But when you say do your research, you can't just Google shit. Hey,
No,
you go
it's so
Google-
dangerous.
Google Scholar.
It's
would be
you
a
want
little
to get
bit better.
scientific articles. People don't want to read scientific articles.
Yeah, boring.
It's funny. It's funny like when people go on a podcast and then they go, we'll put the show notes up and we'll put the research articles there. No one ever contacts you and goes, oh yeah, I want to see that article.
Yeah.
I actually try and reach out to people and say, where's the article?
Yeah.
But do that. Read proper stuff. And hire
You
professionals.
might need to do a little bit of training on how to actually read a scientific journal as well, because it's a different read than.
Oh, it's very different. And how you interpret stats, like that's something that I need to get better at, is interpreting stats and statistics. But anyway, it's a whole.
But anything you want to plug before we finish? Obviously, Athletic Institute.
No, not really. The business, we're getting some ice baths actually in the next couple of weeks.
Sick.
So we've got obviously infrared sauna, and we're going down that recovery space in the process of developing probably a facility that's hopefully going to open sometime next year, but that's in the early works. But yeah, look, just to see our athletes doing well. West Perth won the flag last year, which is fantastic. So this is into our 6th year now.
Yeah.
And I think we can try and give a good run this year. And to all my staff and supporters out there.
You've actually added an ex-AFL player to your staff, Zach Langdon, as well.
Yeah, Langers is down here now. So he got busy real quick, which is awesome. So
Of course he did.
having someone from the AFL world come into AI and who's imparting their knowledge from that side of things is really important as well. And yeah, no, the gym's going well.
You could get Zach on, actually.
It's pretty unlucky.
Yeah, what, 70, 80
pretty stiff.
AFL games,
Yeah,
hey,
pretty stiff, I
GWS?
thought.
I think he was great at GWS. He
Yeah,
got,
good GWS.
He got cut by a year early with West Coast.
Yeah, just unlucky with that one. But no,
Yeah.
he's a legend as well. So, yeah.
Great bloke.
But thank you so much. Delby, we've got, what have we got? We've got Exmouth coming up.
So if you know anyone that's in Exmouth or Coral Bay or in the area, April 18, 19, and then we're back on the 20th.
And we've also got Teacher Comedy,
Teacher Comedy Night, April 12th.
which is going to be yourself, me, Adam Gray, and LeBron James.
Yeah, so Kyle Legacy. So it's just a bit of a Boise, but it should be fun. If you want a code, join Patreon. But also Up in Joke 2.
Oh, Up in Joke 2.
actually
You came to the first one, hey?
I'm pumped for this.
Yes.
The first one was surprisingly good.
It's actually good.
It was actually good.
It was actually good. I was like, I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, it was good. So I'm actually looking forward
Bit
to
of
the
a
second
different vibe, same sort of structure, I think. We're going to aim at getting a bit more interactive.
Yeah, a bit more fun with the crowd.
And a different venue. The venue is sick.
It's
man.
fucking sick. I went and checked it out the other night, and it's the video that Buddha sent me and then that you sent were good, but I just didn't get the full scope of how good it's going to look. It's
So
going to be
it's the
sick.
old North Shore. So it's varsity now.
Yeah.
But at the old North Shore. But just the layout has been accidentally fucking epic. for
Oh,
me.
it's going to be so good.
So, and our green room is like an arcade.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Patreons are going to get, or maybe we say it at the start of the pod,
Yeah, potentially.
but
Yeah.
Patreons will probably flick out a wristband and early seating. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Oh, well, actually, we'll say it now. We were going to try and hook up discounts and stuff, but it's too hard between the two podcasts. So we're going to just have
Priority seating and stuff
perks
like
and
that.
priorities.
Yeah.
So
Sick.
Yeah. You, Branch?
No, nothing. Oh,
B32.
B32 Media.
Yeah.
Fucking last day of West Perth on Friday, basically, or next week.
Yeah.
I'll still be doing videos for them when they hire me and stuff like that, but the Waffle's going to hire me as well, so there'll be stuff potentially still involved with them, but it's pretty scary.
Yeah.
I was saying to you last night, like, would you quit weddings to follow this? Like, it's fucking scary.
Well, yeah, for this, if I was getting $2,500 an episode.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, so like we're getting nothing. So any sponsors want to come and help us out, and then if you want to hire me to create your video content or manage your social media, I'm here. So
he does a great job with us. So he works with us. Obviously, been with us for 5-6 years now. So
now I can give you more.
And now we love what he does, and get him on board.
Sure. Boy.
Sick. Cheers. Good episode.
Stay healthy, eat well.